Chapter 732. The next night in the Sher family villa. Several chefs were busy preparing the dishes. The physical invulnerability experts were sitting around a table, chatting and tasting the delicious food to celebrate Geezer Sher's 65th birthday. He didn't invite any outsiders to his birthday banquet. Other than his old friends like the Queen of Thought and the Divine Enchanter of Sin Flame, his senior brother, his own daughter, his unfilial disciple, and other physical invulnerability experts from the Ice God sect. Of course, the Haishi sect, Hanchi sect, and Dinghai sect of the Wuxia Alliance had all sent qualified disciples to celebrate with wine. Lu Qing was quietly listening to the elders boasting about the past. Suddenly he felt something and turned to look at the door. The Queen of Thought, Fei Dan, had a similar reaction. Geezer Sher and the rest followed in confusion. At this time the sky was dark and the rain was light. Spring was coming. After a few seconds, Shi Jiangwo suddenly asked in confusion. Shi Yuejin was confused at first. Then her eyes lit up. She stood up, walked quickly to the door and opened it. In the drizzling rain outside the door, a tall and majestic figure in navy blue approached slowly with 2 old jars in his hands. Every drop of water that approached him would automatically evaporate without leaving a trace. It was Dragon King Qin Chitao. As soon as he appeared, the living room and dining room that were connected to each other suddenly became silent. All eyes were on him as he approached in the bleak wind and rain, like a big sun that rose in reverse. Qin Chitao walked slowly into the villa without any rain. He didn't need to pretend to be majestic. Shi Yuejin, who was waiting at the door, forgot to open her mouth. So did everyone else. Step by step, Dragon King walked to the dining table and placed the 2 old jars in front of Geezer Sher. The cups and plates moved automatically to make enough space for Dragon King. Yaozhou Ancient Cellar Wine. Qin Chitao patted the seal of one of the jars. A memorable aroma filled the air. Geezer Sher came back to his senses and laughed. I remember there were only 5 jars left. You took half of them. Brat, get another chair. Lu Qing was enlightened when he heard the order. The Dragon King was here to celebrate his birthday. It was just that no one had expected that the atmosphere just now would be as if an enemy had come to exterminate them. His master had most likely just casually invited him, and had never considered the possibility of him actually coming. Of course, the Dragon King's unsmiling and dignified aura was also largely to blame. While cursing in his heart, he and Shi Yuejin found a chair in the guest room and put it next to their master. The Dragon King didn't stand on ceremony and sat down. Back then, back when we were in the war-torn zones, I didn't see you give this old man any wine. Why did you suddenly think of this today? Comrade Shi Jiangwo said half jokingly and half emotionally. It wasn't your birthday at that time. Qin Chitao's poker face didn't change as he answered seriously. Everyone fell silent again, not knowing what to say. What a joke. The Dragon King really has no sense of humor. Another form of the King of Awkward Silence. This was the first time Lu Qing had seen Qin Chitao in such a situation. He couldn't help but complain in his heart. Geezer Sher laughed dryly and shook his head. You haven't changed at all. You haven't changed at all. But this troublesome disciple of mine, I'll have to trouble you to beat him up. Master, he's really beating him up. Lu Qing felt pain all over when he heard the word. After losing to the Dragon King in the Warrior Sage battle, his attitude didn't change. He didn't support his juniors like the rumors said, and was hostile to qualified competitors. He probably felt that he was still not mature enough to pose a threat to Meng Qi. Thinking about it, in the first challenge in the official competition, although he only had 70% of his strength left due to his injuries, he didn't expect to lose so easily and miserably. It was almost like he was hung up and beaten. He truly understood why the Peerless Twins were called the Peerless Twins when they were in perfect condition. In any case, the beating he received once or twice a week had never decreased. However, in the past year he could be considered to have made rapid progress. In his daily practice, although the number of times he won was few, he was finally starting to win. However, every time he won, the next round was bound to be a terrifying counterattack. The inhumane beating was simply unbearable to recall. Just thinking about it was painful. Of course, it was because of this kind of beating that he could improve so quickly. In less than 2 years he could call himself a superclass with a clear conscience. You're welcome. The Dragon King didn't even look at Lu Qing, but his expression was gentle. It was as though this was an activity that could entertain him. Lu Qing couldn't help but touch the corner of his mouth. This injury healed again and again. His teeth grew out again and again. It was almost an old problem. Since the Dragon King had been in the war-torn zones and shared a common language with the Queen of Thought, the atmosphere of the banquet gradually returned to normal. There was no doubt that he listened more than he spoke, but every time he spoke, the table would fall silent. If that god of war could hear your evaluation, his descendants wouldn't be able to hold his coffin board down. Wu Maoyan shook his head at the Dragon King's vicious and mean comments. He was the only one present who could say that. Of course, because the god of war had died at his hands. Geyser also recalled his memories. He was about to brag about his experience of killing a mighty one of the same level when he suddenly saw the Dragon King glance at the door. Immediately after, his unworthy disciple stood up and walked over with a smile. He opened the door and said, "You came at the right time." Lin Kei's expression didn't change in the slightest because of his nonsense. He also carried 2 jars of wine and came to Geyser's side. After a few seconds of silence, he said, "Coach Shi, my grandparents asked me to bring 2 jars of wine that they buried at home for 20 years. I wish you happiness as boundless as the East Sea and longevity as long as the South Mountain." When he was saying the congratulatory words, Lu Qing smiled and waited for his brother-in-law to show signs of stuttering or embarrassment. However, Lin Kei was calm and composed from beginning to end. He didn't show any other reaction. Such an awkward and old-fashioned line? What kind of mood did you have to say it so smoothly? Lu Qing secretly shook his head and muttered silently, "Boring, boring." In a villa beside the Wuxia Club, the dull and stiff Huang Ku finished wiping the ice chi spear. He took out a bottle of wine carved from green jade from the wine cabinet and poured himself a glass. The color was close to amber. His disciple, Zheng Yu, who was still working hard to reach the physical invulnerability stage, asked curiously, "Master, why do you suddenly want to drink?" His master had always been a collector and appreciator. Another disciple, Qian Qiue, looked at the balcony and said, "Today is the 65th birthday of Senior Shi of the Ice God sect. Master, do you want to give him a bottle of wine?" But why did he want to taste it first? Huang Ke didn't speak. Holding the wine glass, he walked slowly to the balcony and looked in the direction of the Shi family. After a moment of silence, he said, "There's no need. We don't have much of a relationship." At this point, his tone suddenly became a little uncertain. "When I entered the sect, he was at the peak of his glory. I've always had him as my goal and wanted to find a chance to challenge him. Unfortunately, I couldn't achieve this wish. And now?" A rare smile appeared on his face. "We're both old. For experts like them, even if they were 30 years older, it would still be easy for them to defeat an inhuman. However, compared to the youths of the same level, they had to admit that they were old." Spear King Huang Ke didn't sigh. He raised his wine glass and drank it in the direction of the Shi family. He toasted them from afar. After the birthday banquet, some bade farewell, while others continued to talk about the past. Lu Qing was afraid that his brother-in-law wouldn't like such occasions, so he pulled him to the quiet balcony and asked with a smile, "You've been through a lot in the war-torn zones this time, right?" "A lot," Lin Kei answered simply. "What are they?" Lu Qing asked with great interest. "Too long," Lin Kei answered with the usual awkward silence. Lu Qing's mouth twitched, then he smiled and said, "Then how did you make the great leap and become a physical invulnerability expert?" "Just like that," Lin Kei answered calmly. "Can't we have a proper conversation?" Lu Qing lowered his head and sent a message to Ku. "Your brother is killing the conversation." Lin Kei watched as he typed on the virtual keyboard. Then he said slowly, "In the war-torn zones, some things are more important than talking." "Yeah." Lu Qing nodded thoughtfully. "If I have a mission there in the future, I'll help out a little. The physical invulnerability experts there probably won't welcome me." After a few seconds of silence, he changed the topic. "Are you going to participate in the Battle of Warrior Sage next month?" "Yes," Lin Kei answered simply. "Well, what's your goal?" he asked casually. Lin Kei looked up and stared at him with his dark eyes. "To defeat you." "Brother-in-law, are you serious or are you joking?" Lu Qing was stunned. Lin Kei turned around and walked towards the guest room. When he was about to leave the balcony, he added, "I'll always work hard." Chapter 733. Watching Lin Kei's figure disappear into the distance, Lu Qing suddenly laughed. "It's great that my brother-in-law has such determination. Even if Dragon King and Warrior Sage were to break through to the Forbidden Zone in 2 or 3 years and no longer participate in the challenge tournament, the circle wouldn't wither away. At that time, Kirindong Bashin, God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan, and the other experts would be at the last but also the strongest peak. Wisdom King Zhihai would probably be one step further. Even if Priest and Chihuahua hadn't gotten the title yet, they would most likely be in the ranks of the superclass. In addition, there would be his brother-in-law who was chasing after him, the clown who was working hard to become the strongest, the living Buddha who possessed the wisdom of past eras, the evening light Liang Yifan, the Optimus Prime Long Zhen, and the heavens equal sword Feng Zhi in their prime. The situation would be even more exciting than it was now. Thinking about the future, Lu Cheng's heart was in turmoil. As his thoughts flew, he suddenly shook his head and sighed. He turned to look out of the balcony. That kind of future was beautiful, but the present was equally important. If he couldn't snatch at least one title from Dragon King and Warrior Sage before they broke through to the Forbidden Zone, it would be such a pity. This was the obsession of a martial artist. Therefore he had to seize every opportunity of a title battle. For example, the new Warrior Sage battle half a month from now. After another morning, Lu Cheng returned to the living room after finishing his training in the Shi family's garden. The moment he stepped through the door, he saw his master lying lazily on the sofa. In front of him were wine jars, cups, beans, peanuts, and other things. This life is so decadent. Lu Cheng muttered to himself. That was true. His master wasn't like other old people who had hobbies like planting flowers, playing cards, and fishing. He also didn't have the desire for power like the sect masters and martial uncles. His television was mostly focused on martial arts shows. All he did was laze around drinking and watching competitions. Once in a month or two he would go to the military base to cooperate with experiments or visit his old friends. A very unhealthy and monotonous life. I have to cultivate some hobbies for master. Judging from the way he is, he probably wouldn't care even if senior sister and senior sister had a kid. There's actually a good example in this regard. Talker's father couldn't be busy because of his illness. After returning home to recuperate, he somehow fell in love with computer games. He didn't like anything else but the romance of the Three Kingdoms series. Since master likes wine so much and doesn't lack money, he could totally participate in wine collection and appraisal activities. Lu Cheng slowed down as thoughts flashed through his mind. Brat, what's with your expression? Geezer Sher was once a top-notch physical invulnerability expert. He turned his head abruptly and glared at his disciple. Lu Cheng laughed dryly and said, I was thinking, master, wouldn't it be too boring for you to just stay at home and drink? Geezer Sher snorted and said disdainfully, Didn't I, this old man, work so hard for most of my life just so that I can drink a little wine comfortably like this? You are so thoughtful. Lu Cheng was speechless for a moment. After lunch, he tidied himself up, picked up his luggage and left. He had to prepare himself mentally and spiritually for the Warrior Sage battle. Shangqing Sect Martial Arts Hall. Many inhuman martial artists surrounded the hall, watching the physical invulnerability experts perform the unique skills of the Thunder Sect. This was their monthly benefit. In the hall, figures crossed each other as wind and thunder danced. Only one area was calm and peaceful. Beside the main pillar was a lounge chair. An elegant white-robed man with a Taoist hairstyle was half leaning on it. He looked extremely relaxed. He was none other than Chen Donglu, the one with the eternal title of Warrior Sage. Of course, he had temporarily lost this title. However, he had snatched the title of King, the Heavenly King of the Thunder Sect, to deliver punishment on behalf of the heavens. At this moment, he was squinting his eyes from the sunlight shining through the glazed roof tiles. He looked as though he would fall asleep at any moment. He didn't show any signs of joining the drill. The Shangqing Sect disciples were already used to his behavior and turned a blind eye to it. It was said that the reason why Warrior Sage Chen Donglu was able to achieve breakthroughs so quickly when he was young was because he felt that once he reached the physical invulnerability stage, he wouldn't be urged by his teachers and could slack off. This mentality only changed when he met Dragon King Qin Chi Tao, and was almost beaten to a pulp by him. Unknowingly, time flew by. Peng Liyun stopped and rested for a while. Not bad. You're progressing fast, said Chen Donglu with a smile, looking at Lu Cheng with no proper posture. Phew. I'm still an unstable first pin. The silver light around Peng Liyun flashed and sizzled. Very good, said Chen Donglu with a chuckle. If I'm slow, I'll probably break through in 2 to 1 year. When that time comes, the reputation of the Shangqing Sect in the professional martial arts circle will depend on you guys. You'll be the one supporting it. When he talked about the forbidden domain, he was calm and confident. A year? I should be close to the superclass in a year. I can compete with Lu Cheng again. Peng Liyun nodded thoughtfully. Shortly after, he thought of something else. I've been working hard to modify the unique skills of the Thunder Sect with modern physics research, but to no avail. Thunder and electricity have been clearly separated. Electricity is an electromagnetic wave, a manifestation of one of the 4 fundamental forces. The weak interaction force and electromagnetic force have long been unified. I'll probably be poor for 10-20 years, or even a lifetime on this path of modification. As he pondered, he felt a tingling sensation all over his body. Shortly after he woke up. "You're in a daze again," said Chen Donglu with certainty and not doubt as he got up slowly. The surrounding electric sparks suddenly became active with his movements. This was why Peng Liyun was woken up. "Thinking about something," answered Peng Liyun honestly. However, he noticed that Chen Donglu's expression was full of disbelief. A person who was used to daydreaming didn't need an excuse. Peng Liyun didn't try to explain. Instead he asked, "Martial uncle, are you going to train?" Chen Donglu smiled. "Yeah. I have to be more serious." At this point he stretched his neck and added a few words of explanation. "I should break through earlier than Qin Chitao. I can't let him surpass me and become the one with the most titles when I'm in the Forbidden Zone and not participating in title matches. I have to take advantage of the next 1 or 2 years to get more titles and widen the gap. Anyway, he's only a year or so behind me." "He's really calculative, especially when compared to Dragon King." Peng Liyun didn't want to tease his martial uncle. Now Chen Donglu was firmly in first place with 23 titles. Dragon King Qin Chitao and Queen of Thought Fei Dan were tied for second place with 20 titles each. King of Swords Wu Qiao was in fourth place with 19 titles. However, with Qin Chitao's strength, it would only take him a year or so to surpass Queen of Thought. Peng Liyun retracted his gaze and looked around the hall. Seeing Yun Yin, Ming He, and the other physical invulnerability experts practicing, he took a deep breath and rejoined the ranks. "I feel like I'm missing someone." He frowned slightly and threw this thought to the back of his mind. Heshi City, Kongtong Hotel, 33rd floor. As it was within the sect's territory, Renli had entered a week earlier. She wanted to use the gradually bustling atmosphere of the warrior sage battle to train her mind and make sufficient preparations. After returning from Jiuwen Dojo, she took a special elevator with her assistant and returned to her residence. Walking along the thickly carpeted corridor, the cute little assistant couldn't help but steal a glance at her martial uncle. Kongtong School had a tradition that had only been around for a few decades. It was to use juniors with mediocre mentors with potential as assistants of physical invulnerability experts. This was to change them every 2 years so that they could be influenced by what they see and hear. They would be able to see things from a high vantage point and receive guidance from the experts. Martial Uncle Ren already has the strength of a first pin at such a young age. She has a high winning rate against those of the same level. She also occasionally succeeds in challenges. By the end of the year, she will most likely have a first pin certificate. Moreover, she can occasionally defeat Martial Granduncle Qi and Martial Uncle Feng when sparring within the sect. She is indeed a heavenly son of the era and a future mighty one with a title. The little assistant's eyes sparkled as she thought. Suddenly she heard an abnormal beeping sound. She looked up and saw Renli standing in front of a door. She swiped her room card again and again but still couldn't open it. She looked lost and was biting her lips slightly as though she had been wronged. Seeing her assistant look over, Renli nodded solemnly. "The room card is broken." The assistant was stunned for a second. She immediately raised her head and looked at the room number. Then she covered her face and said, "Martial uncle, this isn't your room. One ending with an 8 and the other ending with an 0. How could I get it wrong? I just got distracted for a moment. How did it become like this?" "I see." Renli suddenly understood and said confidently, "I was wondering why I couldn't open it." After saying that, she turned around and walked away. Then, she was pulled back by her assistant and silently pointed to the other side. After the matter was corrected, the real door was in sight. The assistant heaved a sigh of relief and said half-jokingly, "Martial Uncle Ren, the door was closed." "Martial Uncle Ren, it's a good thing that the door to the room is closed. Otherwise, what if there's an overbearing president inside? Someone once said this to me." Renli's memory was evoked. "Then what did you say?" the little assistant asked curiously. "I forgot. If it was now, he would do whatever he wanted." Renli replied calmly, "I would throw him out of the window." "Gary." The little assistant reached out to take the room card and opened the door to the suite. As soon as she entered, she followed Renli's habit and turned on the television to a special channel. There was a program on the screen and the guest commentator said passionately, "The challenge of this competition is to see who can stop the warrior sage. We have listed 4 candidates. Based on their performance over the past year, they are the best of the best. They are Kirin Dong Baxian, God-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan, Wisdom King Ji Hai, and Sky-shaking Ho Lu Cheng, who wants the title of God King. Chapter 734. It was near the end of May. The night was clear and breezy. The sky was as dark as a blanket, dotted with diamonds. In Joan Stadium in Heshi City, lights shone brightly, making the stadium and stands as bright as day. The voice of the organizer reverberated. The top 4 of this year's Warrior Sage battle have been officially announced. They are the ones with the permanent title of Warrior Sage. He deliberately paused for a moment, allowing the audience to erupt into a tsunami of cheers. Chen Donglu. Lu Qing suddenly felt as though he was in a dream. It was as though he had returned to last year. It was the same scene and the same commotion. The only difference was that the names were different. Chen Qitao was replaced by Chen Donglu. Yes, he had once again overcome all the difficulties and made it to the top 4 of the Warrior Sage battle. However, as a seed, he had to guide the Inhumans in the first round and avoid the superclass in the second round. Amidst the cheers, he looked around and saw the remaining 3. Other than Warrior Sage Chen Donglu, there was also Kirin, Dong Baxian and Morning Star Ren Li, whom he hadn't expected at all. The fact that this girl, who would never admit defeat and always wanted to stir up trouble, could make it this far made Lu Qing wonder if she was really blessed with a supernatural ability. Along the way, Ren Li had only met a superclass player in the quarterfinals, and he was even the oldest player in the professional scene, Sword King Wu Kuang, who was 1 year older than her. Sword King Wu Kuang, who had been counterattacked by the clown during the quarterfinals, had barely won after a long and arduous battle. In the previous journey she had picked in Chaoyang, who had just advanced and easily defeated him. Lu Qing could only sigh at the fact that hipsters were always bullied by girls. In the second round, Ren Li met the second pin physical invulnerability expert, which Qian Hui. Relying on her terrifying intuition, she successfully broke through her opponent's Art of Illusion sect and her innate hypnosis ability and entered the top 32. When she entered the top 16, her opponent was the soul-hooking sword Song Changting, who was also a second pin martial uncle. In the round of 16 she finally met a strong opponent. However, in an environment where most potential opponents were superclass, she had picked Ocean Tide Yu Guanzhong, a first pin from Xuanwu sect. That was enough to prove that her luck was shining. Compared to Qian Donglu, the warrior sage who had been competing with the strongest since the round of 32, was as unlucky as an African chieftain. At this thought, Lu Qing couldn't help but take another look at Qian Donglu. In the round of 32 he encountered the Wisdom King Zhihai. In the round of 16 he fought the Empress Luo Ning Zitong. In the round of 8 he fought the god-slaying saber Lu Yongyuan. Every match was an intense battle, and every match was a tough one. Especially today, Lu Yongyuan was even stronger than his opponent. The more he fought, the crazier he got. He almost proved himself once again and almost defeated the warrior sage. Although he failed in the end, he almost severely injured the warrior sage. By the time of the semifinals the day after tomorrow, he could at most recover 70%. Lu Qing retracted his gaze from Chen Donglu's face and nodded thoughtfully. Originally this wasn't a big deal, but with Ren Li as a comparison, the warrior sage seemed to be too weak. Of course, this wasn't to say that Ren Li relied on pure luck. In the previous few titles her luck had always been good, but she didn't achieve much. Now that she was in the semifinals, it was more because she already had the standard of a first pin. With this foundation her luck played a role. In the past she might not even have been able to beat the Tide Yu Guanzhong, let alone the King of Swords Wu Qiao. Compared to her he obviously wasn't as lucky. But looking at the warrior sage he seemed to be doing well. Not mentioning the first 2 rounds, he had encountered the living Buddha Shi Shan in the round of 16. With the combination of cultivation, mental strength and a catching up level, he finally redeemed himself and defeated an opponent in peak condition for the first time. Although his mental strength was damaged after the match and he was badly hurt and had a splitting headache, the 9 words formula was good at treating such problems. By the time of the round of 16, he had basically recovered and didn't have any hidden problems. Lu Qing's opponent in the round of 16 was the priest. After a long time he once again encountered him in a crucial official arena. Relying on his advantage in strength, he won after a fierce battle and didn't suffer any injuries. Even though he won, Lu Qing couldn't help but feel that the Taoist martial arts were a little strange. He had a vague premonition that the Taoist was brewing or cultivating some kind of terrifying monster. In time he might become a super mighty one that couldn't be ignored. Thinking of his own advancement process, Lu Qing couldn't help but think about the things that Peng Liyun had hidden in the unique skills of the Thunder sect. To be more precise, it should be called a train of thought. Lu Qing. The roaring of the audience woke him up. Inexplicably, the scene of the quarterfinals flashed before his eyes. His opponent was Ma Xinghong, the long dike that protects the sea. His black tortoise sword and the unique skills of the water sect were indeed extraordinary, and he deserved the title of superclass. However, Ming Qi had lived up to the pressure he received from the Dragon King and his own growth over the past year. After solving many troubles, he finally won. Of course, the injuries left behind weren't light. It would be a blessing if he could recover 80 to 90% by the time of the semifinals. Amidst his thoughts, Lu Qing felt a throbbing pain in his back, chest, arms and legs. In the VIP box, the empty-nest old man Wu Malian sat side by side with his good friend Shi Jiangwo. Smoking his hand-rolled cigarette, he chuckled. The student has surpassed the master. You've taught a good disciple. Surpassed the master? Too early. Geezer sure snorted. Back then, if I had participated in the title battle, it would have been easy for me to win more than 10 titles. Unlike him, he hasn't even won the right to challenge once. There was no Dragon King and Warrior Sage back then. Wu Malian lampooned silently. Then he smiled. I see that you're quite free coming here to watch the competition. Why don't you take in a few disciples and train them well so that they can contribute to the sect in the country? Geezer sure glanced at him and chuckled. It's not like you don't know me. It's good enough to have an unworthy disciple. Why would I have extra time for leisure? Tell me, Geezer Wu. Is there a backdoor entrant who wants to be my disciple and wants to talk to you? You could have just accepted him. At least he's only slightly weaker than me. I've seen through you. You're even more lazy than me. Wu Malian avoided the topic. At this moment, the semi-finals were about to begin. He cast his gaze outside. Geezer sure smiled to himself and mumbled to himself, if I take in a few more disciples and they don't turn into physical invulnerability experts, wouldn't that be embarrassing? That brat would be so smug too. Looking at the organizing committee reaching into the box, Lu Qing tried his best to keep his breathing steady. To me and Chihuahua, the best outcome would be to draw each other and let Warrior Sage and Kirin fight each other. Dong Baxian's advancement process was similar to mine. He was better than the Warrior Sage, so there was a small possibility that he would be able to eliminate the other party. Regardless of who won or lost, after such an earth-shattering battle, both of them would definitely be much weaker. That would be an advantage for me or Renli. Yep, the prerequisite was that both of us weren't heavily injured. In this aspect, I still had some confidence. Let's hope Renli's lucky star continues to shine. As the thought flashed through his mind, the organizing committee member showed the first ball. Shangqing Sect Warrior Sage Chen Donglu. Following which he took out the second ball and announced loudly, Longhu Club Lu Qing. Lu Qing suddenly felt like laughing when he heard this result. Just like last year, he had encountered the strongest one. However, there was a big difference. The Warrior Sage was not as strong as the Dragon King back then, and he was no longer an ignorant person. Almost instinctively, he turned to look at Warrior Sage Chen Donglu, and saw him smiling in greeting. He had an elegant demeanor and the demeanor of a grandmaster. Luckily, he's not a complete Warrior Sage. Lu Qing laughed to himself and nodded back. He felt his body relax as though he had been waiting for this for a long time. The semi-finals of Warrior Sage battle were thus decided. Warrior Sage Chen Donglu vs Sky Shaking Roar Lu Qing. Kirin Dong Baxian vs Morning Star Renli. After drawing lots, Lu Qing and the rest walked to the side and went down the stairs to the mixed interview area. What do you think of Warrior Sage? What do you think your chances of winning are? What do you think of Warrior Sage's performance in this competition? Microphones were handed to him one after another. Questions were thrown at him one after another, reminding Lu Qing of the same situation last year. The questions were mostly the same. He didn't give a specific answer. Instead, he smiled and said, "A chef who doesn't want to be a general isn't a good driver." After finishing the interview with a similar attitude, he left and returned to the hotel. At this moment, the reporters suddenly realized a problem. The new semi-finalist, Morning Star Renli, who lived up to her reputation as a heavenly son, hadn't come for an interview. In a quiet corner, the round-faced assistant was frantically making a call. "Hello, Marshal Uncle, where are you?" "No." Assistants weren't allowed in the lot drawing ceremony. Soon, Renli's serious voice came from the other end of the line. "I'm here." The wall is on the left, the wall is on the right, the road is in front, and the road is behind." The assistant was dumbfounded. Sitting in the SUV, Lu Qing took out his phone to check but didn't see any reply from Yan Zhika. Entering her graduation period, she was so busy that she couldn't even attend to the competition in China at night and the competition in Connecticut in the morning. She even had to make time to check the results. Putting down his phone, Lu Qing looked out of the window. The lights were bright in the morning and the neon in the night. Suddenly, a special reminder sounded. He picked it up and saw that it was from Yenjika. Good luck. It was simple, just 2 words. It was as though he didn't forget to take a peek when he was in a hurry. Whenever he had the time, he would press his phone. Beep. A few seconds later, another message came. It was tight and urgent, but also very simple. I have high hopes for you. Lu Cheng's lips curled. Chapter 735. May 19, 6 p.m. Lu Qing arrived at Jiuwen Stadium early and entered his personal lounge. He didn't turn on the lights or the big screen TV, leaving the room in complete darkness. In this absolute darkness, he sat on the sofa and stared ahead, immersing himself in his own emotions. Before the big battle, he quietly recalled the emotions that had left a deep impression on him. He recalled the throbbing emotions that had supported him step by step to reach this point and made his final preparations. That was the love and care of his parents. That was the reluctance to see them haggard, tired, and in pain. That was the kinship that manifested in small things like stir-fried eels. That was the love that originated from the bottom of his heart, brewed in silence, blossomed in youth, and bore fruit. That was the uncontrollable confession and the "let me be happy for 5 minutes" of tonight's Yu Ming. That was the feeling of wanting to protect when he saw the girl curled up in his arms. That was the motivation of wanting to become better and to give her better. That was the satisfaction and responsibility of exchanging rings and promising each other a lifetime. That was the feeling of being comforted by next time. That was the ecstasy of winning for the first time and winning the championship. That was the melancholy of bidding farewell to Songqing youth and friends. That was the unwillingness when facing a dark sect 9th pin and facing Gu Hui's sudden attack. He didn't want to let his loved ones suffer. That was the determination of breaking through the Jindan after thousands of twists and turns. That was the loneliness of being alone in the middle of the night. That was the unfulfilled heart of being separated for a long time. Scenes of the past flashed past, becoming clearer and clearer. They lingered and brewed, fermenting strength. May 19, 6:30 p.m., in the Physical Invulnerability restaurant affiliated to Jiuwen Stadium. A table full of dishes was placed in front of Qian Donglu. The fragrance of the dishes wafted into his nose. He picked up his chopsticks, picked up the food and put it into his mouth leisurely and contented. He didn't show the slightest hint of nervousness and caution from the intense battle he was about to face in an hour. These noodles are really good. You guys can try. Qian Donglu smiled at Peng Liyun and the rest. His attitude seemed to be able to calm everyone around him and ease their anxiety. Looking at his calm expression, Peng Liyun couldn't help but sigh. Martial Uncle Qian had experienced countless finals, so the semi-finals were just a piece of cake for him. In this aspect, he was indeed better than Lu Qing, who hadn't even touched the finals. However, Martial Uncle Qian was not deliberately being leisurely. Instead, it was due to his lazy nature. Moreover, it coincided with the state of mind of the Shangqing sect's cultivation method. This could only be described with 4 words: Tao of nature. Qian Donglu gobbled down his food like a whirlwind. When it was almost 7, he put down his bowl and chopsticks, stood up slowly and smiled. It's time to get ready. After he finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the lounge. His white robe fluttered gently, and his black Taoist bun seemed to blend into his surroundings. May 19, 7 p.m. outside Jiuwen Stadium. A few young girls with the childishness of a student got off the car and went straight to the door. On the way they saw a vendor selling light sticks. Thinking that they had only prepared a small trumpet and an inflatable hammer, it seemed that they were missing something, so they went over and after some bargaining each of them bought a light stick. They planned to use it when cheering later. After buying some other things, they found the entrance marked on their tickets and lined up at the back of the queue in an orderly manner. As they moved step by step, the girls excitedly discussed the upcoming competition. I think my hubby might win this time. What do you mean your hubby? He's obviously my hubby. I think so too. Lu Qing has an advantage in the competition. The warrior sage has encountered strong opponents consecutively. He's exhausted and injured. Yeah, that's what I saw from the analysis of the VIPs. I don't care about the analysis. I'm relying on my intuition. But I still feel that the war sage is not that easy to win. No matter the result, we have to give it our all. Otherwise, how can we cheer for my hubby? Looking at their half-nervous, half-excited, lively discussions and listening to their internet slang, someone at the back secretly shook their head and muttered, "This batch of fans can't make it? As they chatted and laughed, the girls finally arrived at the security checkpoint. They found a box for storing light sticks. A security guard gestured for them to throw their items in. "We can't bring these? We could bring them in the past. Why didn't you say so earlier?" Those vendors outside definitely knew. They even sold them to us. How infuriating. Forget it, forget it. I'll just take it as accumulating good karma for Lu Cheng. After some discussion, they didn't make a fuss. One by one, they threw the items they shouldn't bring into the box. After passing through the security checkpoint, they walked into the stadium and looked for their seats in an orderly manner. May 19th, 7:30 p.m., in one of the VIP rooms in Joan Stadium. Geezer Sher happily pushed open the door and entered with a bottle of wine. He scanned the room and saw old friends like Queen of Thought, Fei Dan, Empty Nest Grandpa Wu Malian. "Why are you only here now?" Fei Dan shook her head in amusement. "The competition hasn't started yet, right?" What kind of master would stand in front of his disciple? Geezer Sher laughed and walked towards the empty seat. "Warrior Sage has fought a few tough battles before this. I think my silly disciple might actually win tonight. Hey, if he really wins, I'll have to talk to Wu Guang, that old bull-nosed Wu Guang. I'll let him know how we felt when he kept mentioning Warrior Sage back then." Wu Malian was stunned for a moment and said in surprise, "Jiangwo, Geezer Sher, you actually got Wu Guang's Taoist name right." Comrade Shi Jiangwo sat down slowly and smiled proudly. "Wu Guang and I have been old friends for decades. I'm already used to his supernatural ability. Although we haven't met for a few years, I still remember his Taoist name very well. I'm strong, my realm is high, and my memory is good. You can't deny that. Unlike you, I didn't pay attention to that old ox nose for a few months and started calling him Wu Guang, Wu Guang, Wu Guang, Wulingdi, and Wulingdi." His words instantly attracted laughter. Even Queen of Thought, Fei Dan, was a little convulsed. In the circle of the older generation, joking about the five lights was a constant source of amusement. In such a scene, the relatively calm reaction of the physical invulnerability expert beside Geezer Sher was rather unusual. He immediately caught Geezer Sher's attention. He turned his head and looked at the unfamiliar yet slightly familiar face. He subconsciously blurted out, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry." "And this is?" Everyone went silent. The physical invulnerability expert who was asked sighed and replied faintly, "I'm Wu Guang." May 19th, 7:40 p.m., Joan Stadium's reporters' seats. Some people were busy communicating with the backline and the organizing committee to adjust the live broadcast image bit by bit. Some people were wearing bulletproof vests, armor, and helmets. They slipped below and approached the safety barrier. They set up their heavily guarded cameras and aimed them at the arena. This was a supplement to the aerial and orbital filming. In addition, some people were posing and commenting before the match. Some people were also writing on paper. "What are you doing?" a cameraman asked the latter curiously. Xu Rui smiled and said, "I'm thinking about the interview questions." She didn't have an interview today, but she had made up her mind. As long as Lu Qing broke through his bottleneck and got the best results, she would shamelessly ask him to accept another interview. The questions written on the paper were exactly what she wanted to ask during the interview. For example, why do you want the nickname, God King? Don't you have any feelings after using sky-shaking roar for so long? In private, other than Qing, what other nicknames do you have? Who do you want to thank the most? Are there any heartwarming or interesting stories you want to share with us? After some idle chatter, someone suddenly shouted, "Get ready, get ready." Hence, most people turned their attention back to the arena. In the live broadcast studio, the host said with a straight face, "Everyone get ready. The competition is about to begin. It's about to begin." On the live broadcast platform, guest commentator He Xiaowei suddenly straightened his back. "Let's start the countdown." In a certain live broadcast channel, Kai Zhongming also coughed twice. May 19th, 7:45 p.m., Joan Stadium's exclusive resting room. Lu Qing came back to his senses and his eyes suddenly became deep. He stood up and walked towards the door. Every step he took seemed to be filled with strength. Just as he was about to reach the door, his phone suddenly rang. He took it out and saw a message from Yenjika. She sent an emoji with fists shining. "I'm with you." A smile appeared on Lu Cheng's face as he replied with a fighting emoji. Then he locked the screen and looked ahead calmly. A few seconds later he stepped out and pulled open the door with force. Clang. Light surged in from outside the door and shone into the darkness. P.S. Don't forget, I have acupuncture tomorrow morning. Yes, you can watch the video congratulating Yuewen's listing. In it, you can see that I haven't recovered from my facial paralysis. However, that was taken on October 20th. Now I'm much better. Chapter 736. Out of the main entrance, Lu Qing followed the path of glory. With the tens of thousands of spectators in different attire and their loud cheers in the background, he entered the arena without any distractions and walked step by step to his designated spot. At this moment, warrior sage Chen Donglu was strolling in from the opposite exit. Dressed in a white robe, his Taoist hairstyle was simple and unadorned. There were no changes in the weather. There were no dark clouds, low air pressure, or thunder. For a moment, Lu Qing felt that warrior sage was looking down on him. He recalled his battle with Dragon King. Both parties had tried to gain the upper hand by showing off their strength, resulting in heavy clouds, reverberations, and leaps of silvery light. Heat, hazy clouds, and crimson light. It was nothing like the calm and natural scene now. Natural. Just as these two words appeared in his mind, he suddenly felt as though every step the warrior sage took was stepping on his heart. Thump, thump, thump. Lu Qing's qi and blood started to fluctuate. His heart was in a mess and his vision gradually blurred. He saw layers of dark clouds and silvery white electric snakes shuttling through them. He saw that the surrounding area had turned into a desolate Gobi. In that instant, he couldn't differentiate between reality and illusion, even with the enemy heart-freezing move and the advanced god above head. He felt as though he had turned into a poplar tree that had lived for hundreds or thousands of years, facing the gathering lightning above his head amidst the coldness. The might of the divine punishment of righteousness, Yang, and Yang grew more and more obvious and terrifying. It made one tremble in fear and find it difficult to resist. In such a scene he was the only one in the world. Without help he felt extremely lonely, panicked, and helpless. Lu Qing had experienced a similar experience when he faced the living Buddha Shan. However, one of them was an illusory land of pure land that showcased the grandeur of Buddha, while the other was a scene of thunder punishment that showcased the majesty of heaven. This meant that warrior sage Chen Donglu was no weaker than the living Buddha in terms of mental strength. In fact, he might even be stronger. Warrior sage is a little closer to the forbidden zone. Lu Qing didn't dare delay. He took a deep breath, turned his mental strength and unique path into intent, and extended them outwards. His surroundings immediately turned dark, as though it had absorbed all the light around him. In this darkness, there were specks of dazzling light like diamonds, but their existence didn't bring light. Instead, with their sparseness and insignificance, they set off the profundity, darkness, and boundlessness of the environment. Lu Qing was the only living being here, and when he raised his head and looked around he felt boundless, lonely, and frustrated. Within the indescribable emptiness, the might of heavenly punishment was diluted and diluted. No matter how dignified it was unable to disperse this eternally unchanging boundlessness and desolation. Bzzzt bzzzt bzzzt. The sound of electric current from another galaxy entered his ears. Lu Qing finally saw the warrior sage again. He saw him leisurely walking amidst countless lightning bolts. He saw him stop at a predetermined spot and gently nodded his head in approval. Bye. No, it had already started when they were still in the exclusive resting room, or even when they had drawn each other's lot. This was a real fight between experts. The audience also felt this atmosphere. Their cheers and cheers unknowingly stopped, and the atmosphere was tense and oppressive. In a VIP room, Shi Jiangwo was silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a dry laugh and said to the physical invulnerability expert beside him, "Haha, it's been 5 years, right? You've aged a lot and changed a lot. I didn't recognize you the first time I saw you. That's why I thought you looked familiar. Yeah, this old man isn't affected by supernatural ability. It's just that Taoist Wuguang's appearance has changed a lot. Plus, we haven't seen each other in a long time, so I didn't recognize him." Even Shi Jiangwo believed his own words. Taoist Wuguang looked up at him and sighed. "You didn't tell me about your birthday celebration." Shi Jiangwo turned into a clay puppet. "Let the conversation begin." The referee's voice came from afar. It was like a wisp of smoke rising in the vast and empty universe. Chen Donglu didn't say a word. He looked down at his opponent. Lu Qing knew that it wasn't that the warrior sage wasn't good with words, nor was it that he wasn't good at engaging in a battle of the mind with just a few words. There was only one reason why he didn't speak, and that was because he was lazy. He couldn't be bothered to speak and he couldn't be bothered to waste his time. Lu Qing kept his silence as well. The strength he had fermented earlier flowed slowly in his heart. This time he didn't form the 5 flames in advance. He wanted to keep his mind and body calm to deal with the opening storm. Seconds and minutes ticked by. The referee in his insulating suit stood on the line. He raised his right hand and swung it down. Begin. Before he finished speaking, a silver flash appeared before Lu Cheng's eyes. The warrior sage Qian Donglu had closed the distance between them like a flash of lightning. Behind him, the airflow condensed into cones and droplets that looked like expanding white mist. However, Lu Cheng, who was overlooking everything and sensing the subtle changes in heaven and earth, sensed it ahead of time. Like a giant magnet tied to his opponent, he moved according to the situation. When Qian Donglu approached, he moved to the side, giving off a strange feeling that they would never meet again. While dodging horizontally, Lu Cheng's right leg muscles swelled. With a bang, he threw a side kick to the spot where he originally stood. It was just right. But as soon as he moved his knee, Qian Donglu straightened his back and turned his accumulated strength into inertia. He didn't stop at Lu Cheng's previous position, like a slag truck that couldn't stop its momentum and couldn't stop. Boom. Only then did the sound of him breaking through the air reach Lu Cheng's ears. The terrifying sonic boom chased after his figure and expanded rapidly. It turned into a solid iron wind that slapped at Lu Cheng. Qian Donglu's swift thunder was comparable to Dong Baxian's transient steps. It was much faster than the speed of sound. His spirit was stronger than living Buddha's, and his speed was only slightly slower than Kirin's. This was why the warrior sage was called the warrior sage. This was a martial arts genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years. He could quickly master any martial arts and surpass others. He had almost no shortcomings and could be considered strong in any aspect. Fighting with him would really make people feel despair. It would really make people feel like they couldn't fight against him. Thump. After Qian Donglu rushed past where Lu Cheng had been standing, his body tensed up. He took a big step forward, turned his back and whipped out his left leg. Bam. He whipped his leg horizontally and drew out a bright silver blade. The blade split apart the shockwave created by the sonic boom and slashed at Lu Cheng, who was retreating due to the ladder. As he retreated, Lu Cheng pointed with his right index finger and shot out a ray of crystal-clear ice spirit holy light. With a whoosh, the cold light landed on the silver blade and disintegrated it along with Qian Donglu's body. At this moment, Qian Donglu had already turned around. Instead of using the supersonic footwork, which was a huge burden on his body, he strode forward and chased after Lu Cheng. With every step he took, his body grew bigger and stronger. His muscles quickly tightened and propped up his clothes. The places that were exposed even had purple, green, or silver lightning patterns. The purple seal in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. Thump, thump, thump. With every step Qian Donglu took, the sky darkened. Dark clouds gathered and lightning accumulated. It was as though a heavenly punishment would descend at any moment. This was no longer an illusion. It was unusually real. His body and mind resonated with the heavens and earth. In this environment where the sharp sword was hanging high above his head, and where the natural lightning was definitely faster than his evasive maneuvers, Lu Cheng let go of his control over his premonition. Suddenly he activated the attainment formula, stimulated his body and flew backward. Just as he moved, the lightning struck vertically. Bam, bam, bam. They rose and fell one after another, forming a horizontal silvery white line. However, because Lu Cheng had dodged in advance, the silvery white line always brushed past him in a hurry. Just as the lightning behind and to his left and right were about to erupt and bombard him, he suddenly paused. Light blue spurted out from his back and shot towards Qian Donglu like a rocket. Bam! He rushed past the area where the lightning had already fallen and the power of the lightning was thin. Amidst the slight numbness that didn't affect him, he ran towards the warrior sage who was striding towards him. As he advanced and retreated, he defused the threat of the lightning forest, purple seal of the celestial master. Bam! Halfway through, Lu Cheng strangely retracted his qi and blood and stopped. In his lower abdomen, a miniature universe rapidly formed. Bright stars moved and outlined a huge fighting art. Bam! His body expanded and his muscles bulged. Like an ancient giant, he took a heavy step forward and raised his arm towards the warrior sage who was already near him. Chapter 737. Clang. The arena shook violently as Lu Cheng and the warrior sage stepped forward. It was as though a plane was attempting supersonic flight at low altitude. Immediately after, the ancient giants collided. One of them had a lightning tattoo and was surrounded by purple electricity, while the other had bulging muscles and explosive strength. Bam! With a loud boom, Lu Cheng took 2 steps back. Tiny electric arcs jumped from his right fist and spread to his entire body, causing his hair to stand on end. Chen Donglu also took a few steps back. His arm was visibly shaking from the impact of the terrifying power. The numbness quickly deepened. Lu Qing immediately retracted his qi and blood, using force concentration to alleviate the negative effects and stabilizing his body. But at this moment his body was pulled by an invisible force and he couldn't help but stagger. His force concentration was disintegrated as soon as it was formed, and he couldn't fully dispel the numbness. Between him and the warrior sage Chen Donglu, it was as though a mysterious rope was pulling at him. Once the distance between them widened, the rope tightened and pulled back. Under this pull, Chen Donglu was already leaning towards him. He lowered his shoulders slightly as though he could move mountains and crush alloys. Bam! Lu Cheng threw a left punch with the explosive force of his incomplete dance stage, hitting his opponent's shoulder. His waist swayed backwards and he took a step back to mitigate the force. This time he didn't hastily use force concentration. Instead, he instantly formed a layer of crystal clear ice around his body to isolate the electric charge and cut off the invisible suction force. As the ice wall formed, Lu Cheng's pupils suddenly shrank. Chen Donglu had lowered his waist and didn't give chase or pull at the rope. He raised his hands and suddenly clapped them together, as if he was slapping something, giving people the feeling that he was lifting something heavy with ease. Not good. Lu Qing didn't have time to do anything else. He could only use the most basic method to pull at his spine and pounce to the side. Boom. A thunderous roar reverberated in Lu Cheng's heart, shattering his ice heart. His mind was sluggish, and he could only rely on inertia to maintain his body's movements. Fortunately, he had the enemy heart-freezing move to block it, so he wasn't completely stunned. He immediately visualized the forwarding character and suppressed the remaining waves. Bzzz. Chen Donglu opened his palms and pulled out a purple lightning blade as thin as a cicada's wing. As soon as it appeared, it struck Lu Cheng's body, ignoring the distance between them. The eighth move of the Thunder Sect. Thunder from a clear sky, cloudless thunder saber. Sizzle. Although Lu Cheng tried to dodge, he couldn't completely avoid it. The ice layer on his right rib shattered and a charred crack appeared. Purple electric arcs and strong paralysis were drilling deep into it. If he hadn't congealed the ice wall in advance, his whole body would have been paralyzed and he would have fallen to the ground. Moreover, the wound would have exposed his internal organs. Even so, half of his body was still numb, landing unsteadily. He staggered, feeling a bit uneasy. At this moment, Chen Donglu extended his body. Dark clouds immediately piled up in the air, and lightning snakes leaped about. Streaks of silvery white light streaked across the sky, setting off his tall and mighty figure. He was like the god of thunder, punishing on behalf of the heavens. Standing there, he gave off the feeling that this was how it should be. Zzz. Countless bolts of lightning gathered in his palm, seemingly transforming into a spear of execution. Bam! Looking down on Lu Cheng, Chen Donglu swung his right fist in the form of a punishing spear. The irresistible pressure weighed down on Lu Cheng's heart, causing it to beat wildly. Panic, fear, dread, and despair. This move was similar to the god-slaying saber's eternal silence. It was a transformation similar to the Forbidden Zone, a perfect blend of punches and kicks striking both the body and the mind. This was the second move of the Thunder Sect, punishment on behalf of the heavens. This was its most brilliant and most extreme performance because its user was the warrior sage Chen Donglu. Lu Qing, who had just stabilized himself, felt a surge of negative emotions and a strong sense of danger. But this time he wasn't able to rely on his premonition to grasp the strongest point of Chen Donglu's attack, because there were several places. The premonition that he relied on to avoid danger was disrupted. Although it didn't disappear or get blocked, it wasn't accurate enough. This was the move of the warrior sage. With a change of mind, Lu Qing didn't use force concentration or the complete 9 words formula to break free from the mental suppression of his opponent. Instead, he unleashed the power and fermented emotions hidden deep in his heart. Similar desperate situations always felt familiar to him. They always filled him with unwillingness to fall into a deep slumber, unwilling to part with his parents, cuckoo, forever. That was the strong desire to live on. Grasping this desire, Lu Cheng seemed to have returned to the state he was in when he met with the 9th pin of the Dark Sect and the cultivator Gu Hui. His body was clear both inside and outside. His strength, ice, fire, spirit, and premonition were all mixed together, gushing out. With a shake of his arm, his fist struck out with a rumbling boom. With the premonition of danger as the helm and the desire to live as the driving force, it met the spear of divine punishment. His fist trembled slightly, shuttling back and forth in the lightning forest, where it was hard to distinguish between reality and illusion, as though he was playing Thunder Fighter. The Cosmic Universe sect, his self-created unique skill, life. Bam. The darkness retreated, the lightning dissipated, and all illusions parted. Lu Cheng's fist accurately blocked Chen Donglu's right fist. Their muscles, tendons, and bones were deformed to varying degrees, presenting a picture of strength. Bzzz. The lightning spear broke through the remaining ice crystals, numbing Lu Cheng's left arm completely, temporarily losing all feeling. Chen Donglu, on the other hand, was hit by the ice and fire. The capillaries on his fist ruptured, covered in white frost. In a head-on clash, Lu Cheng was clearly inferior, even if his opponent was the warrior sage with 70% of his HP. Bam! With a sidestep, he stirred up the wind and snow. Dodging to the side, he finally put some distance between himself and Chen Donglu with the help of force concentration. With a release of force, the numbness subsided, and his left arm barely recovered. Following which, he used the wind and snow to cover his tracks and approached Chen Donglu, initiating the fight. Logically speaking, the best way to fight the warrior sage, who was at 70% of his HP, would be to move around and slowly wear him down, avoiding his attacks and attacking his weak points. However, Lu Cheng believed that this would only lead to a miserable defeat. Not to mention the warrior sage's supersonic lightning-quick footwork, just allowing him to unleash his full strength and build up his momentum without resistance was a very dangerous move. Once an expert at the peak of physical invulnerability like him got used to fighting and built up his momentum, he would be unstoppable. He could even put up a fight against an expert from the Forbidden Zone. His spirit could temporarily overcome the weakness of his physical body. Therefore, Lu Cheng's goal was to wear him down, but he was going tit for tat with his opponent. He was trying to interrupt Chen Donglu's build-up and prevent him from feeling satisfied. Bam! Amidst the howling wind and the falling snow, Lu Cheng flashed to Chen Donglu's side. Facing his enemy from the side, he bent his elbow and struck. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. He punched and kicked using fire-like invasion. Every move was covered in purple flames and filled with heat. Together with his opponent's silver-white, green, or bright purple lightning, they painted a strange scene. Sparks flew and electric arcs danced. After 19 moves, Lu Cheng put his elbow in front of his chest. Combining all the strength in his body, he swung his arm forward as though he was thrusting a spear. This time, his fist was no longer covered with Emperor Yen force. After 19 moves, the imbalance in his body had worsened, and the ice spirit had accumulated by itself. Relying on the uniqueness that was difficult to achieve in orthodox martial arts, he had reached the standard of a big move. Lament of the Ice Queen. Both parties were in a close-range brawl. Faced with such a punch, Chen Donglu seemed to have no way of dodging. He could only take it head-on. Let's see if the ice coffin could seal him longer or if the thunder and lightning could break through it faster. At this moment, he slowly and leisurely punched out with his left fist. Bzzzt bzzzt bzzzt. The tiny lightning snakes leaping around returned and gathered together. Then they transformed into a black lightning in the shape of a ping-pong ball. That works? Lu Cheng's pupils contracted, but he couldn't stop his momentum. The warrior sage could actually execute the 9th move of the Thunder Sect, Yin-Yang Reversal, Devourer of Dark Destruction. Compared to before, his realm had increased again. Or rather, he hadn't had the opportunity to use it in his previous matches. After all, he was the only physical invulnerability expert of the Cosmic Universe style. Poof! Lu Cheng's fist was blocked by the black lightning ball. The accumulated lament of the Ice Queen was like a flood that fell into the sea, unable to create any ripples. However, the black lightning ball didn't explode. Instead, it gradually dimmed and disappeared as though it had been frozen. In such a collision, Lu Cheng's body froze. For a moment, he felt as though his spirit was being devoured. Suddenly, he saw the warrior sage retract his hands. His palms were about to close and strike again. Lu Cheng didn't think too much about it. Fire force erupted from the soles of his feet. Pale blue flames spurted out as he flew backwards. Chen Donglu's palms stopped in midair, facing each other. Between his palms, countless thunderbolts were born and extinguished and reborn. An extremely terrifying mental force suddenly locked onto Lu Cheng, causing him to abruptly stop flying. He felt as if the world around him had been isolated, boundless and desolate. All that was left was the thunderstorm that was about to destroy everything and bring an end to everything. Restriction Sect, Shangqing Chapter. All living things die. Chapter 738. For a moment the area around Lu Qing was as dark as the clouds. The sky was small and the ground was narrow. There was nowhere to hide. Countless lightning bolts were about to erupt and cover the entire area. This was both an illusion and reality. Accompanying all of this was the hands of the warrior sage Qian Donglu, the hands that reaped victory. Lu Qing, who had just stopped flying, knew that using the complete 9 words formula could only break through the mental suppression and prevent him from being affected by most of the illusions. However, he would have to defend against the real lightning bolts and attacks with his fists and feet. That would be very dangerous. In a flash, he restrained his instinctive reaction and sought strength from the emotions brewing in his heart. His parents' less haggard faces and Yenjika's pure and peaceful expression as she slept appeared in his mind. The throbbing desire to protect and hold on filled his heart. At this moment he straightened his back like a man. With his parents and wife behind him, how could he retreat? He had to face the difficulties and do what he knew was impossible. Some things were more important than living. Bam! Lu Qing took half a step forward, his willpower erupting like a volcano and as firm as metal. The darkness around him faded away, and the isolated area returned to nature. As their minds clashed, his subtle premonition grasped the source of the danger. His right arm made a pulling motion. Boom! Bolts of lightning flashed, illuminating the entire arena. The lightning bolts swept across the sky, with the warrior sage's hands hidden as the strongest point. Bam! In the instant before the lightning bolts erupted, Lu Qing punched out his right fist. The faint purple light in front of him expanded rapidly, forming a thick layer of ice on the surface of his body. In the past year, his attainments in the cosmic universe sect had deepened. He could now do things that he couldn't before. For example, with one punch he could separate ice and fire, combining attack and defense into one. Combined with the willpower, feelings, and emotions that had run through his entire martial arts career, it was a killer move that he had created himself. Cosmic Universe style, Guardian. Boom! Amidst the earthquake-like shaking and crackling sounds, Lu Qing's body was covered in silver snakes, shattering the layer of ice. In front of his fist, flames turned into clouds and expanded, blocking Qian Donglu's purple thunder seal. Thump, thump, thump. Having lost the upper hand, Lu Qing, whose body was somewhat numb, was bounced back. His footsteps were slightly messy. In that instant, he recalled the time when he had used tilting northwest, sinking southeast, to cause Lu Yongyuan to react in a similar manner. Then he had used a series of terrifying attacks to take away his opponent. He had a deep understanding of his current situation. However, just as he was about to detonate the fire force in his body and move to the side in a strange manner, a figure appeared in front of him in a flash and crashed into him at a speed faster than the speed of sound. The warrior sage's lightning strikes before the ears, bang. Lu Qing crossed his arms in front of his body to block the attack. He was pushed backwards by the overwhelming force. Crack. Several bones in his chest were broken, so he quickly gave up on stabilizing his body and flew backwards. Otherwise, both of his arms would have been fractured. Then there was no way to fight. Rumble. The cloud of the sonic boom expanded, and the violent wind made Qian Donglu's white robe dance in the wind. He looked inexplicably lofty. Relying on his strength, his figure fluttered as he chased after Lu Qing. He took a step forward and clapped his palms together. Rumble. A thunderclap pierced through the remnants of the explosion, causing Lu Qing's mind to buzz for a moment. His ice heart shattered once again. The second and third section changes he had prepared deflated naturally, as if a car tire had been ruthlessly pierced by a steel nail. Thump. He landed on the ground and hurriedly leaned back. A thin purple thunder saber slashed between his chest and abdomen, almost extending to his throat and head. With a sizzling sound, a deep wound appeared in front of Lu Qing. Crimson blood didn't flow out, only signs of charred flesh. His whole body went numb, and only after a moment of rest did he have the strength to concentrate his abdomen. At this time Qian Donglu had already caught up. His left leg tightened, surrounded by silvery light, and he lashed out with a series of attacks. Bam! 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 In such a precarious situation, Lu Qing felt as though he had returned to the semifinals of the Supreme Class battle. At that time, he had encountered a warrior sage who was in a much better physical condition than today. At first he could still attack and defend, but very soon he fell into a similar situation. Under wave after wave of combos, he could not hold on for long and was defeated miserably. Was he going to repeat the same story today? The thought flashed through his mind. Lu Qing gritted his teeth and blocked with a heart that was a mixture of survival and protection. He didn't panic. Bam, 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 crackle. Lu Cheng's ice heart was activated again. His god shone and his sharp senses detected this. Now is the time. He stopped using ice spirit and allowed the Emperor Yen force in his body to surge out of his fists. Qian Donglu's expression didn't change. Holding the initiative, he dodged to the side and struck with his palms again. Lu Cheng's body shook. Before he could swing his fist, the purple flame had already dissipated. It was like a dud that could only burn the air and the ground. Bam! Lu Cheng had already dodged the cloudless thunder blade in advance, but Qian Donglu launched another attack. 9 Heavens Ensemble, Lightning Tribulation. Bam! 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 Because of this, Lu Cheng, who had lost his accurate judgment of time, could hold on bitterly under round after round of crazy attacks. Although he was in a sorry state, he didn't show any signs of defeat. However, Qian Donglu's attacks seemed endless. Lu Cheng's numbness accumulated and his injuries worsened. Bam! Finally, after 2 punches, Lu Cheng's muscles and tendons trembled violently. He couldn't help but stagger back. His mind went blank and he temporarily lost the ability to retaliate. He knew that if the warrior sage took this opportunity to attack, he could only resign himself to his fate and accept his defeat. However, the expected attack didn't appear. Lu Cheng recovered and saw the white-robed Qian Donglu doing force concentration. Had his combo finally come to an end? Had he finally exceeded the limit of the freezing? Had the hidden injuries from the previous few intense battles finally shown? Here's my chance. Without hesitation, Lu Cheng followed up with force concentration. He withdrew his qi, blood, force, numbness, trembling and other sensations into his dantian. Moving his stars, he outlined 9 ancient words. Confrontation. Army. Fighting. Swordsman. Wholeness. Formation. Deference. Forwarding. Attainment. Bam. He pushed out both palms towards Qian Donglu, who had already launched an electric punch. His mental strength surged and his willpower penetrated. Suddenly, Qian Donglu felt a little dizzy. He felt as if darkness had descended around him, so deep that it seemed to have no end. The bone-chilling sensation was both cold and lonely. This was Lu Cheng's concept of the universe. Loneliness, frustration, coldness, and pain flooded Qian Donglu's mind. Even though he was the warrior sage, he had tasted similar emotions before. He couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. His punches slowed down. Lu Cheng took advantage of this short delay and arched his back. He dodged the attack and prepared himself. In the dark and boundless universe, stars rose one after another, each emitting a pure white light. They rushed towards Qian Donglu from all directions. The illusory coldness materialized, sealing the warrior sage's body in ice. This was his self-created killer move, Universe Phantom, which was infused with mental strength. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. One by one, the eternal stars charged towards the warrior sage, with tails of flames behind them. Qian Donglu narrowed his eyes. Silver white, pure green, and bright purple lightning leaped from his body. They shattered the ice and struck the fireball. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions rang out, shaking the earth and mountains. Qian Donglu forcibly blocked the killer move. However, his face was pale and his qi and blood were waning. At this moment, Lu Cheng straightened his back and took half a step forward. He raised his arm and clenched his fist, forming a dazzling darkness. Tilting northwest, sinking southeast. Bam. He flipped and fell, calming the remaining lightning, flames, and wind. It was as if they were suppressed or destroyed. Qian Donglu took a deep breath. His body suddenly expanded, transforming into a thunder giant. Under the ancient and abstruse thunder seal patterns, he threw a punch forward. Boom. Amidst the explosion, he swung his arm back and retreated. Every step he took left deep footprints, as though he was trying to dissipate the force that was difficult to resolve. Lu Cheng gathered his Dan force and drew the fighting formula. He strode forward and punched down. Bam, bam, bam. He used the Dan force explosion and the complete fighting formula 3 times consecutively. The violent and terrifying force left Qian Donglu wobbling, bleeding from his mouth and nose. However, the other party still managed to hold on, relying on all kinds of exquisite and extraordinary methods to hold on. Lu Cheng's momentum slowed. He had no choice but to stop his killer moves and switch to normal punches and kicks. He launched a barrage of attacks to suppress the warrior sage and prevent him from pulling away. In this kind of attack, he punched with ice spirit and slowly condensed white, faint purple and other fireballs around him. He was accumulating the 9 rotations of 5 flames, just like the fire sect physical invulnerability experts except for Dragon King. Chen Donglu tried his best to break free. Lightning danced wildly and spread across the ground, but to no avail. When the 5 flames were formed, Lu Qing leaped forward, and the fireballs around him quickly converged into one. At this moment, lightning flashed across Chen Donglu's body, forming a stark contrast with the lightning snakes slithering on the ground. He floated up half an inch as though he was repelled by the ground. Then he slid back with almost no friction, narrowly avoiding Lu Cheng's punch. Even in a passive situation, the warrior sage still had the foresight to make such a move. Shocked, Lu Qing hurriedly stabilized the 5 flames to prevent them from converging. He didn't want to waste his ultimate move. Suddenly his eyes narrowed. He saw Chen Donglu's abdomen squirming as he retreated. He opened his throat and let out a thunderous roar that shook the 3 realms. He didn't have the energy to use thunder from a clear sky. Cloudless thunder blade while floating backward, but he could use other methods to disrupt his opponent. Boom. Lu Cheng's mind shook. His ice heart cracked and the 5 flames around him were about to go out of control. At the critical moment he stabilized his ice heart and regained the balance of the 5 flames with his absolute control. This wasn't the Tao of ice and fire, but a technique from the 9 rotations of 5 flames. Descent of the sun itself. In that instant, Lu Qing recalled the Dragon King's advice. When he was proud of his cosmic universe style and could easily use the 9 rotations of 5 flames, the Dragon King had specifically said, use this time to practice the 9 rotations of 5 flames again. You're relying on cultivation techniques to omit the complicated control techniques in the 9 rotations of 5 flames. These things won't help you use the 9 rotations of 5 flames better, but they can improve your control of the various flames. These are the basics. Some shortcuts can be taken but some things can't be saved. The scene flashed. Lu Qing secretly circulated his qi and blood to stimulate his body. He used the simplified attainment formula and pounced. Leaving behind afterimages, he caught up to the exhausted warrior sage Chen Donglu. Bam! He clenched his right fist and punched. Golden, faint purple and light blue fireballs converged into one. Chen Donglu's expression changed slightly. His body contorted as he threw a punch out of thin air. Rumble. A blinding white light, like the arrival of the great sun, shone on the sunglasses. The arena shook violently and a mushroom cloud rose. As the flames and shockwaves swept across, Lu Qing, who had retreated a few steps, straightened his back, formed a layer of ice and dashed towards Chen Donglu. Bam bam bam. Enduring the damage he approached. He saw the warrior sage, who was in a weakened state for a brief moment. If he waited for the power of descent of the great sun to pass before launching his attack, the warrior sage would most likely be able to recover and hold on for a while longer. At that time, it would be hard to tell who would emerge victorious. Lu Qing clenched his teeth and reached out with his left hand to grab Chen Donglu's arm. However, the moment he made contact, he realized that Chen Donglu was like a nimble snake. However, this was Lu Cheng's attempt at controlling the warrior sage's remaining strength. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he paused his left hand and stomped on the ground. His entire body turned sideways and rammed forward like a cannonball. Bam! With Chen Donglu wide open, Lu Qing pressed his shoulder against Chen Donglu's chest. With a snap of his right elbow, Lu Qing swung his arm downwards, stopping right in front of Chen Donglu's vitals. Silence fell and the waves began to subside. Through his sunglasses, the referee saw the frozen scene from afar. He quickly raised his right hand and shouted, Lu Qing wins. P.S. 4,000 words chapter. Chapter 739. Lu Qing wins? As the wind blew and the clouds drifted, the frozen scene finally changed. Lu Qing stood up straight, raised his arms and saluted. Thank you for the match. It was just a simple gesture but it caused pain in his chest. His senses returned and he heaved a sigh of relief. Gradually he felt overjoyed. Other than the tag team battles and the professional matches, this was the first time he had defeated the warrior sage in a one-on-one battle, even if it was a 70% warrior sage. Compared to the situation during the Battle of Supreme Grades a year ago, although the other party's physical condition was worse, he could clearly feel his own improvement. That was what made him the happiest. Chen Donglu took a deep breath, and his expression softened. He shook his tattered white robe, took a deep look at Lu Qing, shook his head and sighed. You looked like Qin Shitao when you charged through the explosion just now. After that, he turned around and walked slowly to the corresponding exit. Lu Qing was stunned. He couldn't help but criticize in his mind. Usually, people compare you to me. What do you mean when you say I look like the Dragon King? Who do I look more like? Why does it feel like I'm a product of the different characteristics of the Dragon King and the Warrior Sage? That's a weird sentence. The joy of defeating the #1 physical invulnerability expert in the world made Lu Qing relax. All kinds of strange thoughts popped up one after another. At this moment, the live audience finally reacted. They cheered in amazement. Lu Qing. Retracting his thoughts, Lu Qing endured the pain and waved. In his fan forum. Nye Chi said with a shocked expression. This doesn't make sense. How did he win? Unparalleled Dragon King replied with a funny expression. Why can't he win? Lu Qing is at least a superclass and the gap between him and the Warrior Sage isn't that big. The Warrior Sage has been fighting hard all this while, and he even got hit by Lu Yongyuan. It's good enough that he's at 70% of his peak condition. As for Lu Qing, he only encountered 2 strong opponents. The battle with Living Buddha was a mental injury. Based on the data, he should have recovered from this long ago. Therefore, the battle with the long dike that protects the sea drained him a little, but his injuries weren't that serious. Today he's about 80 to 90% of himself. Given this, it's not impossible for him to win against the Warrior Sage, even though it's difficult. I mean, how did Lu Qing become a superclass? That's too fast. I feel like I'm in a dream. Peng Liyun and Ren Li are only at the first pin level. Nye Chi expressed her astonishment incoherently. A plumber eating mushrooms said, didn't the interviews and reports mention that Lu Qing is a future grandmaster? He blended other sects and created the cosmic universe style. He just made the great leap and became a physical invulnerability expert, which is a level higher than Peng Liyun and Ren Li's starting point. Plus, he didn't slack off and was constantly beaten by the Dragon King. It's normal for him to be half a step ahead of them. Look at the Wisdom King. He became a superclass in a little over 2 years and got a title in less than 3 years. Lu Qing has so many conditions which is almost unprecedented. It's natural for him to become a superclass half a year earlier than him. Plus, Lu Qing had the reputation of being a superclass on the spot last year. Invincible Punch explained. Eternal Nightfall Yan Shaoling said, clenching fist glows expression. What's the point of saying so much? I can't be bothered to listen to your analysis. Anyway, Senior won. He won. Ha ha ha, he beat the Warrior Sage in the title battle. Yeah, Little Nightfall is right. His existence is reasonable. Now, we can say that our idol is the leader of the 4 heavenly sons. Nodding solemnly expression. Don't be happy too early. Let's wait until Lu Qing gets a title in the following year. Otherwise he still can't beat the Wisdom King. Let's accumulate some good karma. Wonton Seller said. Yeah, he hasn't even gotten the right to challenge. I think Lu Qing is seriously injured today. He might not be able to beat Dong Baxin next time, Unparalleled Dragon King said objectively. In the live broadcast studio, the guest commentator He Xiaowei laughed and said, I knew it. Lu Qing will definitely be one of the leading figures of the era after the legendary twins. He'll definitely be one of the 2 or 3 brightest ones. Phew, in less than 2 years as a physical invulnerability expert, he defeated the Warrior Sage directly and entered the final stage to fight for the right to challenge. Since the beginning of the title battle, he's ranked 2nd. The host echoed in shock and amazement. As for the first place, it was of course the record holder, Chen Donglu. Wherever there was a good record, his name would be there. Sometimes he would even occupy a few spots in the top 10. For example, in less than 2 years as a physical invulnerability expert, he not only entered the final stage to fight for the right to challenge, he also entered the final stage and won 2 titles. He Xiaowei said happily, although the Warrior Sage wasn't at his peak today, to be able to defeat him is enough to prove Lu Qing's standard and level. So here comes the question. What will be the first title Lu Qing will win? When will it be? You're welcome to guess on my Weibo. When the result is out, I'll reward the correct one handsomely. You're putting up a small advertisement. The host scolded jokingly. Xiaowei, don't be too confident. Let's not talk about whether Lu Qing can repel your poison healer. Just the uncertainty of the challenge tournament itself makes it hard to say whether he can win a title in the following year. Think about it. Unless you have unrivaled strength like the Warrior Sage or the Dragon King, the title battle still depends on luck. Especially for superclass fighters like Lu Qing. If you really want to win the final battle, you can't do without the right time, place and people. Look, even the unrivaled Warrior Sage couldn't resist Black Hand this time. Facing strong opponents and tough battles all the way, he was finally stopped by Lu Qing. Of course, relatively speaking, as long as his luck isn't that bad, the right to challenge will still be in his bag. He Xiaowei rubbed his bald chin and said, "That's right. That's why I don't think Lu Qing will win the right to challenge and win a title this time. He still lacks the right time, place and people, and his luck is still lacking. Unless he draws Renli today. It's a pity that time can't be turned back. Yeah, Lu Qing was pretty badly injured in the previous battle. Kirin Dong Baxian shouldn't have any problems fighting Renli. When it comes to the finals, the difference will be very obvious." "I feel like you've poisoned Dong Baxian?" The host gasped. "My confidence is shaken. I'm just saying it out of habit." He Xiaowei laughed dryly and changed the topic. "I just looked through the information. Lu Qing is the youngest physical invulnerability expert to defeat the warrior sage in a one-on-one battle. I have a feeling that the era of the scepter legacy is changing. The legendary twins are about to come to an end. In the next 10 or 15 years, will it be a scene of heroes vying for supremacy and gods rising together? Or will it be a scene of someone dominating a generation and dominating the world? But no matter what, Lu Qing's name is destined to shine. Perhaps in the future he will really get a nickname he likes and become the king of the age of Pantheon." "Xiaowei, your eloquence is getting better and better. You're making my blood boil," said the host, half smiling and half indignant. In a well-known commentary room, the bullet screen was flooding in. "Why aren't you saying anything? Why are you suddenly silent? Come out and continue praising. We're all waiting for you to praise him. Tell us, are you secretly wiping your tears? Are you still a man? Weren't you talkative before? Every time Lu Qing won you would shower him with compliments. Why are you mute today?" "Lu Qing defeated the warrior sage. He defeated the warrior sage. Aren't you going to say something? Damn it, my mood is ruined by you guys," Kai Zongming said in a low voice, annoyed and amused. "Don't you guys know? This is called saying, silence is better than words. This is the highest award. Commentator, you really don't lose with words. Talker lives up to his nickname. When you and Lu Qing combine, you can dominate every second of the challenge tournament. I remember the Dragon Ball combination technique. Oh no, I've exposed my age. Lu Qing wins?" In a VIP room, Geezer sure raised his eyebrows and laughed. He extended his hand to the side and said, "Wu Guang, my disciple isn't bad, right?" His hand missed. He turned his head and saw that the seat beside him was empty. Taoist Wu Guang had left at some point. "Where is he?" asked Shi Jiangwo. Queen of Thought, Fei Dan and the others looked at each other blankly. Lu Qing enjoyed the joy of victory as he walked back to his exclusive lounge and took his phone from Amen. Yan Zhika had already sent him several emojis. Some were sitting in a daze, some were pale with fright, some were waving tail, some were setting off firecrackers to celebrate, and some were offering kisses. After sending these emojis, she was more concerned about another question. "How are your injuries?" "A few broken ribs and countless wounds on my body." Lu Qing grinned. "I'll be lucky if I can recover 50 to 60% by the time the finals begin." Bone fractures were different from bone fractures. They couldn't be healed in 2 or 3 days. By the time the finals began, he would barely be able to hold on. Facing Dong Baxian, one of the top 3 players in the world, in such a state, the result was obvious. "You're fine. How can Warrior Sage not pay the price?" Yan Zhika tried her best to comfort him. "Maybe Renli can create some trouble for Dong Baxian and leave him with a hidden danger?" "That's true." Lu Qing smiled and asked, "Cuckoo, shouldn't you be busy with your studies today? Why do I feel like I've watched the entire competition?" She replied with an angry eyes, "I don't care if it dies." Chapter 740. After treating his injuries, Lu Qing was in no hurry to leave and return to the hotel. Instead, he stayed in the exclusive lounge to watch the second semi-final match. Although everyone believed that Kirin Dong Baxian would win, actual combat was always full of surprises. Lu Qing couldn't guarantee that Renli would definitely lose. In the arena, absolute strength didn't mean absolute victory. There were many factors that could affect the outcome, such as mentality, courage, perseverance, character and importance, physical condition, mental state, and the ability to counter each other. Under the circumstances where there wasn't a huge gap between realms, it wasn't impossible for a third-pin physical invulnerability expert to win against the warrior sage. However, the probability was very low. Back when Chen Donglu was beaten to the brink of collapse by the Dragon King, he was always doubting and denying himself. As a result, he was indecisive and lost to second-pin and third-pin opponents consecutively. It took him a while to get rid of the shadow and walk out of it. Therefore, Renli, who was at the level of a quasi-first pin, was only slightly weaker than Dong Baxin. If she really had some sort of trump card that no one knew about and used it at the right time in addition to the other party's pride and contempt, the result might have been reversed. For most superclass fighters, they might win 7 or 8 out of 10 matches against ordinary first-pin fighters. However, when it came to a single match, it was hard to say for sure. If that wasn't the case, upsets wouldn't exist. Title matches wouldn't exist either. That would be like going back to ancient times, when the Dragon King and the Warrior Sage would have a match every year. Lu Qing sipped on his hot drink and watched the big screen leisurely. Since the start of the match, the development was exactly what everyone expected. Renly relied on her wind sect movements to tangle with Dong Baxin's aggressive attacks. She patiently wore him down and occasionally counterattacked. After 3 or 4 minutes, Renly gradually fell into a passive position and could only hold on bitterly. After a while, she was surrounded by dangers from time to time. It seemed that failure was only a matter of time. During this process, Dong Baxin saw that she used a lot of new things that originated from the Wind Sect and the Plague Sect but were branded with her own characteristics. However, they were all countered by Dong Baxin. It's almost over. Lu Qing sighed as he controlled his body and started to repair the minute details. At that moment, when Renly couldn't dodge and seemed to have lost her ability to defend herself, a pure sword light flashed and went straight for Dong Baxin. Bang! Renly was struck by the palm and was sent flying. Blood gushed out from her mouth while Dong Baxin stood in place with a strange expression on his face. The long sword had pierced through his body, creating a hideous wound. Thump! Renly fell outside the arena. She struggled a few times but failed to stand up. The referee announced Dong Baxin's victory and signaled for the medical staff to come over as soon as possible. Seeing this change, Lu Qing frowned. With Dong Baxin's level and strength, he shouldn't have been unable to block Renly's last desperate attack. Why was he half a beat slower? Why was he injured in exchange for victory? And why was his injury so serious? Soon he thought of the hidden scent that Renly had used when she was in the dance stage. He replayed the previous 3 minutes in his mind and realized that Dong Baxin's sluggishness wasn't sudden. It had been there for a long time, but it wasn't so obvious. As a bystander, he couldn't see it. Is this the secret art of physical invulnerability corresponding to hidden fragrance? The Kong Tong school uses the Wind Sect as the core and blends the incomplete chapters of the Plague Sect? A terrifying biological weapon? Wouldn't it be too scary when combined with the Wind Sect's movement technique? Fortunately, Heaven's equal sword Feng Ji had never been involved in this field. Lu Qing retracted his gaze and came to a conclusion. Dong Baxin's injury was probably more serious than it looked. Kuku's words had come true, hadn't they? Lu Qing shared this with the busy Yanjika. Then he got up slowly, met up with Amen and returned to the hotel. Just as he entered the suite, he received a call from Empress Luo Ning Zitong. Have you been blessed by divine monk Faiyuan recently? This kind of luck is simply enviable. She tried her best to learn the internet slang of children, to keep her spirit young. However, she didn't realize that this was a trend from a few years ago. What's wrong, Sister Ning? Lu Qing roughly guessed that it was about Dong Baxin. However, he was puzzled that Empress Luo would call him personally. Ning Zitong chuckled. I received news from the organizing committee that Dong Baxin is most likely going to withdraw from the competition due to his injury. That girl from Kongtong School sure is ruthless. Of course, Chihuahuas are much more ruthless than big dogs like Huskies and Alaskan Malamutes. Lu Qing thought to himself. Then he froze. Wait a minute? Dong Baxin is going to withdraw from the competition due to his injury? Doesn't that mean I'm guaranteed a spot in the final challenge? This luck, I don't even dare to think about it. Lu Qing gave a perfunctory reply. When Empress Luo hung up the phone, he still couldn't believe what had happened. He opened Weibo and saw that He Xiaowei had posted a new post. According to insider information, Dong Baxin may be withdrawing from the competition due to his injury. In an instant he received hundreds of replies. What the F***ck withdrawing from the competition? Another victim of the poison milk, and the effects are extremely devastating. I'm kneeling, salute to the poison milk hierarch. You just healed him once and he can't take it anymore. This skill is comparable to FGW's causal weapon. He's invincible. Maybe it's because of Renly's luck. But Lu Qing is the one benefiting. He must have done something. Sigh, if Dong Baxin had gotten the right to challenge, he might have had a chance of winning against the Dragon King. However, Lu Qing is still far from it. The Battle of Warrior Sage in July is a foregone conclusion. Yeah, it's boring. The Dragon King will win anyway. The corner of Lu Cheng's mouth twitched. He felt that this matter was too surreal. Suddenly he received a message from talker Kai Xiaoming. Have you been stepping on dog shit lately? Lu Cheng replied, amused and annoyed at the same time. You pooped? While many of his friends were looking for him, Yan Zhika took the opportunity to say, scared. Am I a jinx? No way. This is called prophecy coming true. You have a golden mouth and jade teeth and your words are law. Your character is shining brilliantly. Lu Qing praised with a smile. While they were chatting, his phone rang again. It was Empress Luo. Sister Ning, has Dong Baxin confirmed his withdrawal from the competition? Asked Lu Qing when the call went through. Ning Zitong chuckled. No, I'm telling you. His injuries are serious, but he has decided to continue the competition. After all, there's only one match left. Given Dong Baxin's pride and arrogance, he must think that he can beat you in his half-crippled state. And he has a high chance of winning. Lu Qing chuckled upon hearing that. He could feel his fighting spirit surging and burning. Then I'll wait and see. Chapter 741. May 21st, 8 p.m. Jiuan Stadium. The spectator stands were packed with people, their shouts deafening. Lu Qing stood in the middle, recalling the scene of the University Martial Arts Tournament finals. It felt like a lifetime ago. In front of him, Dong Baxin left the exit and walked over step by step. He was wearing a light white martial arts suit with crimson markings. He was tall, about 1.9 meters tall, but he didn't look clumsy. Instead, he gave off a slender vibe. Dong Baxin's hair was combed up and tied into a simple bun. His facial features weren't outstanding, but they were well defined. He looked masculine and powerful, as if he was looking down on the world. He didn't look too good, and one could see the discomfort in his gait. As a result, he didn't reveal his aura and engage in a mental battle. When he stopped at the predetermined spot, the referee glanced at the electronic watch on his wrist, pushed his sunglasses up and raised his right hand. Conversation time starts now. Dong Baxin looked at Lu Qing, his eyes filled with an unruliness that didn't belong to someone his age. His lips curled slightly as he spoke calmly. I know my injuries are much more serious than yours. My chances of winning today aren't high. He's not as arrogant and conceited as I thought. Lu Qing was slightly taken aback, so he reined in his thoughts and waited for him to continue. Dong Baxin tilted his head, shifted his gaze up, and stared at the lights in the dome. Compared to the title of Kirin, I miss my title of king more. I can be defeated, but I will never admit defeat, even if it's just an injury. Unless I can no longer move. This was the philosophy and will of the warrior king. At this point he smiled faintly. Besides, it's not like I'm bound to lose. There's still hope if I give it a try, but there's no chance at all if I withdraw directly. Even if the chances aren't high, I'll do my best to pursue it. Dong Baxin's aura suddenly erupted. The light from the dome seemed to be attracted by an invisible object and firmly attached to his body, covering him with a pure and brilliant armor. That kind of upright, proud, tyrannical and disdainful feeling shot straight to the clouds. Influenced by his words, Lu Cheng's fighting spirit also surged. He lowered his waist and replied with a smile, I'll also do my best to pursue victory. The two of them stopped talking. Their auras affected the heavens and the earth, changing the atmosphere in the stadium. There was a flash of light that tried to illuminate everything, and there was also a snowstorm that tried to bury everything. The referee retreated step by step to the edge. After waiting for a moment, he raised his right arm and swung it down. Begin. Thump. Dong Baxin, draped in a cloak of light, took a step forward in a standard offensive posture. Lu Qing reacted immediately. With a twist of his waist and back, he turned around and attacked his opponent from the side with the momentum of the blizzard. At this moment, under Dong Baxin's martial arts suit, his veins bulged like dragons. His body suddenly disappeared and reappeared in front of Lu Qing at supersonic speed. Without any fancy moves, he charged straight at Lu Qing. Golden scripture of Donghuang Shunpa. The battle was intense from the very beginning. A few minutes later, the Jiuan Stadium was filled with craters. There were flying rocks everywhere, glass-like objects that had melted and reformed, as well as charred and frozen traces. In the largest shallow pit, Lu Qing and Dong Baxin were only 2 to 3 meters apart from each other. Both of them looked extremely pathetic. After blacking out for a while, Lu Qing regained consciousness. He felt his spirit was almost drained, and his head was throbbing with a piercing pain. He struggled to stand up, only to realize that he had fractured a few parts of his body, including his left arm. The biggest wound was so deep that his internal organs could be seen. Bam! Lu Qing finally got up. He swayed a little and almost lost his footing. He looked up and saw Dong Baxin trying to stand up but failing repeatedly. He was in a worse state than him. What a tragic battle. If I had underestimated him, I might have fallen into Dong Baxin's trap and been successfully defeated by him as the weak. His words at the start were to express his determination and willpower, but at the same time, it was also a show of weakness to numb me. Who would have thought that once we started fighting he would go all out without a care in the world? Luckily, I wasn't blindly optimistic and still took this combat king seriously. In the end, we were just rookies. As his thoughts raced, Lu Qing took a deep breath and resisted the urge to visualize. He used a simplified version of the confrontation formula on Dong Baxin. Instantly, Dong Baxin's exhaustion overwhelmed him and he stopped struggling. He was already at his limit, so all he wanted was to lie down and rest. Lu Qing, on the other hand, felt his body and mind clear. His wounds wriggled faster and healed slightly. Gently biting the tip of his tongue, Lu Qing resisted the urge to sleep. He moved his feet and came beside the defenseless Dong Baxin. Seeing that the tip of his foot was pressed against his opponent's temple, the referee heaved a sigh of relief. He raised his right hand and announced loudly, "Lu Qing." He took a deep breath and raised his voice by a few notches. "Victory." Phew. Lu Qing exhaled a turbid breath. His vision darkened again as golden spots of light danced around, making him break out in cold sweat. Finally, I've won the right to challenge. The Warrior Sage Challenge was in mid-July. He had plenty of time to recover to his peak condition. Of course, his opponent then would be the Dragon King in full strength. Upon hearing the referee's announcement, the relevant sections of the internet went into an uproar. Headlines popped up like mushrooms after a rain. Lu Qing lives up to expectations. Victory. Champion of the Heavenly Sons of Heaven, won the right to challenge for a title half a year earlier than Wisdom King. Consecutively defeating Warrior Sage and Kirin, Lu Qing's first place in the elimination round is well-deserved. Is he expected to win his first title in July? Dragon Tiger battle in July. Apart from these praises, there were also many people expressing their disappointment. I can foresee that the Warrior Sage battle in July will be very boring. I'm not belittling Lu Qing. He will definitely have many titles in the future. However, he's still too inexperienced. Winning the right to challenge this time was more of a fluke factor. In this state, he has almost no chance of winning against the unruffled Dragon King. Comparatively speaking, if Dong Ba were to challenge him first, he would at least have a 30% chance of winning. Alright, let's look at this match without any suspense with blessings. Lu Qing didn't pay attention to the comments online as he was treating his injuries. When his right hand was free, he quickly replied to Yenjika. Proud smile emoji. The first match you'll watch when you return to China will be the Warrior Sage battle between me and Dragon King. Yenjika sent an emoji of pushing up her sunglasses. She replied, "Are you inviting me?" "Of course." Lu Qing replied with a smile. After chatting for a while, Yenjika put down her phone and looked at the information on the computer screen. She thought for a while and flipped to July, on the decorative calendar at the side. She found 12th, and picked up a fountain pen to mark it. Before that it was 5th of July, when she returned to China. Yenjika took a deep look at the calendar and took a deep breath. She shook her fist lightly to encourage herself and then immersed herself in learning. After lying in the hospital for a few days, Lu Qing, who had recovered slightly, returned to the Longhu Club. He felt a little uneasy. According to the rumors about Dragon King's character and his observations over time, this top-notch physical invulnerability expert was indeed narrow-minded and indifferent to his challengers. He wouldn't even show them the slightest bit of respect, let alone training them. In the past, he didn't have the qualifications to enjoy such treatment. However, now that he had obtained the right to challenge the Warrior Sage, Dragon King's attitude might change. After changing his clothes, Lu Qing stepped into the physical invulnerability training ground. Just as he was about to enter his own section, he saw Dragon King Qin Chitao, standing in front of him in a navy blue suit. He was expressionless and majestic. "How's your injury?" Qin Chitao asked in a low voice. "It's almost done." "I can start training now," Lu Qing replied after some consideration. Qin Chitao nodded indiscernibly and pointed to the lakeside. "Since you've recovered, let's start sparring." "Okay." Lu Qing was delighted at first but was soon filled with doubts. Dragon King's attitude is different from what I expected. Did he have a change of heart? But as the saying goes, a leopard can't change its spots. Could it be that he still thinks that I'm not qualified and can easily beat me? Thinking about it, I'm a little disappointed. At this moment, Qin Shitao had already turned around and walked out with his hands behind his back. Lu Qing quickly gathered his thoughts and followed him. He subconsciously touched the corner of his mouth and felt an inexplicable pain. Chapter 742. She counted down the days as she busied herself. May was finally over and June was coming to an end. Yanjika changed her clothes, grabbed her backpack and walked towards the bedroom door. Before she left, she subconsciously looked back at the marked calendar. It's almost time. The busiest thing is done. All that's left is the paperwork. She looked away and walked down the stairs briskly. She got into Du Yan's car and arrived at the Connecticut campus. The greenery here was excellent. Trees were everywhere and many of the roads were quite interesting. Walking among them and seeing all this, Yanjika suddenly realized that she had not paid attention to the scenery around her for a long time. She was so busy that she could not bear to waste a minute and a second on unimportant things. But now it's all over. She could relax again. She pursed her lips into a sweet smile. Her right foot stepped lightly in front of her left foot, and then her left foot did the same. She walked slowly in a straight line. Her body swayed slightly from time to time, as if she was simulating an invisible balance beam. She entered a quiet building at the end of the road and knocked on the door of her tutor's office. "Good morning, Mr. Furman. Are you looking for me?" Her tutor, Furman, was almost 80 years old. His face was full of wrinkles and age spots, but he was still hale and hearty. He did not have the cloudy eyes of his peers. He turned his chair and looked at Yanjika. He crossed his hands in front of his chest and smiled. "Sophia, are you really not going to consider continuing? Over the past 2 years, you have displayed outstanding talent and proven your ability. Your rigorous thinking, keen observation, and unique insights have left a deep impression on me. Why don't you continue? Yes, a degree is just a performance. It is not necessarily important. But you have just opened the door to this field. There are so many treasures waiting for you to explore and obtain. If you stay here, you will have a deeper understanding of this field. You will also have opportunities to get in touch with frontier affairs. I believe that there is no other place in the world that suits you better than here." A world-class master, a master who had brought out so many economic award winners, had given her such high recognition. Yanjika felt satisfied and happy as if she had gained something. She bit her lower lip and looked up. After a moment of silence, she said, "Mr. Furman, thank you very much for your recognition. I'm very excited. Becoming the best in this field has always been my dream, and it hasn't changed even now. However, it has nothing to do with external factors. It's just a personal hobby of mine. I will continue, but not here and not necessarily in the next few years. Since I have opened the door, I want to spend my life exploring, researching, and enjoying it slowly. It's like tasting a delicacy. Maybe I will come back for a short visit, but not now. I hope you don't mind that I often send you emails to ask you questions or discuss. Earth is just a village. It doesn't matter where it is." Furman nodded slowly. "All right." He waited for a few seconds before asking again, "Can you tell me why?" Yanjika's dimples could be seen. "Because I have more important things to do." Furman didn't mention this matter again and signaled for the girl to leave. Yanjika turned around and slowly left the small building. The sun was just right outside. It was warm but not hot. The ground was shining with golden light. Her mood was calm and peaceful, but there were bubbles bubbling inside her. Suddenly, she thought of a song and couldn't help but hum its melody silently. "I'm going to marry you tomorrow." On a sunny morning, Lu Qing put on his disguise and arrived at the International Arrival Hall of Huaqing Heishui Airport. Today is the day little fairy returns. The torturous long-distance relationship is coming to an end. Lu Qing couldn't hold back his excitement. If it weren't for the Warrior Sage Battle Finals in a few days, he would have used the opportunity in the second half of the year to fly over to pick her up. Songqing University and Kongshan University's joint training program was equivalent to a master's degree. Students could obtain degrees from both universities. Previously, Cuckoo had wanted to shorten the training period to 3 years, but she had failed to do so because the curriculum was already very tight. Hence, it was still the normal 4 years. 4 years was a long time for a young man in his 20s. And it is finally coming to an end. Lu Qing couldn't calm down. He looked down at the time, the flight schedule, and the bouquet of flowers in his arms. My brain must have gone haywire. Why did I think of buying a bouquet of flowers? Feels so silly to wait like this. Lu Qing couldn't help but criticize himself. But in the blink of an eye he was drowned by his memories. The farewell was still vivid in his mind. Little Fairy's confession, no longer holding back her tears, was as clear as yesterday. Above the clouds the plane flew at high speed. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled below. On such a journey bumps were inevitable. Yenjika was wearing an eye mask. She tossed and turned but couldn't fall asleep. Suddenly there was a violent jolt. The plane seemed to have been forcefully pushed to the side. Many people screamed. Unpacked coffee, food and other things flew everywhere. Yenjika took off the blindfold abruptly and grabbed the armrest with both hands. She was obviously nervous. To her this wasn't a normal reaction. She had always boasted that she wasn't afraid of death. Born with a congenital defect, she was weak and sickly since young. Before the age of 10, she was admitted to the hospital every few days. Death was so close at hand. Such an experience made Yenjika feel that she didn't care about life and death. She felt that it was just a natural outcome and that there was nothing to be afraid of. That was why she wasn't afraid of heights, extreme sports like bungee jumping, or the unexpected changes in the plane. But now she couldn't control her anxiety and fear. And these emotions got worse as the bumpy ride continued. Because she had finally finished her education, because her long-distance relationship was about to come to fruition, because a new phase of her life was about to begin, because there was a silly guy waiting for her at the airport. She wasn't afraid of death, but she was afraid of regret. Her hands clenched tighter and tighter, her veins popping. Yenjika could barely hear the consolation from the radio. Half of her mind was filled with worry and fear, and the other half was rational but panicked thinking. If the plane crashes into the sea with my strength and supernatural ability, I should have a good chance of surviving. If that happens, Qing will definitely search for me at all costs. Then he will miss the Battle of Warrior Sage. Why am I thinking about this mess at this time? If something really happens, how am I going to save myself? As her thoughts flashed, the plane finally stabilized. The cabin was a mess. Phew. Yenjika exhaled. Her tense muscles and tendons relaxed and she felt exhausted. She leaned back and thought, if Qing knows that I'm scared because of this, he'll definitely laugh at me. After some time the plane finally arrived and landed. Yenjika, who was exhausted, found her luggage and went to the hall with the remaining tension. Before she could move her eyes, she saw the familiar guy holding a bouquet of flowers. He pretended to be gentle and natural and smiled. Let's go home. The remaining tension disappeared. Yenjika's vision blurred. She reached out and grabbed the bouquet of flowers. She raised her chin slightly and said with a hint of sobbing, it's me who's taking you home. It's good to be home. P.S. The Chidian app has been updated recently. Once you fix the wrong words in the article, all the chapters before this node will disappear. Previously, the section about Coach Shi and Wu Guang was swallowed up by almost 200 articles. Therefore, I haven't been updating recently. Instead, I'm updating and updating again. However, if there are any omissions, I won't update them in case the chapter disappears. Chapter 743. July 12, 6 in the evening, Silk Road Hotel, Heshi City. Lu Qing stood in front of the mirror, smiling as he watched Yenjika tidy his collar and smooth out his wrinkles. Done. So handsome. She looked him up and down, clapped her hands and nodded in satisfaction. Lu Qing looked at himself in the mirror. His martial arts suit was white, giving off a youthful vibe. The black edges gave off a sense of steadiness, which complemented his own temperament. It made his face, which was not considered handsome, look quite attractive. He laughed involuntarily. Don't go against your conscience and praise me. I've always won with my inner qualities, not superficial looks. Yenjika was amused. She wrinkled her cute nose and said, haven't you heard that beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Or do you not trust your wife's taste? Before Lu Qing could answer, she nudged her husband's shoulder. It's time for you to leave. Go to Jiuwen Stadium and adjust your condition. I'll be there for uncle and auntie. Don't worry. The Battle of Warrior Sage was one of the earliest title matches. It retained many of the ancient dueling traditions. For example, the final match was a single match to determine the winner. Due to this reason, Lu Qing, who had several VIP room slots, formed a group of friends and family, including travel and lodging. Lu Qing walked to the door and chuckled. Uncle and auntie? Have you forgotten what to call them again? After the Battle of Warrior Sage ends, we can take the opportunity to discuss the wedding while our families are together. Why do I feel like you're raising flags? Yenjika looked at him and joked. It's like the old general on the stage with flags all over his body. Once you're in debt, you won't have to worry anymore, Lu Qing joked. Just as he pulled open the door and was about to leave, she suddenly pulled him back. Yan Zhika came up to him, tiptoed, and kissed him lightly on the lips. Then she stood straight and looked at him with a smile. Good luck. At this point, she deliberately made her tone lively. I'll be waiting for you to come back to discuss the wedding. Full of motivation. Lu Qing smiled and pumped his fist. Then he stepped out of the room like a general on an expedition. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly turned back and teased, "Remember to call me Mom and Dad." Yan Zhika tilted her head and looked to the side. A second later, she turned back and watched Lu Qing enter the elevator with her dimples. After waiting for a while, Yan Zhika packed up her belongings and went to the lobby of the hotel. After a while, she saw the Lu couple, accompanied by Qi Yunfei, Qin Xiaoxiao and other younger generation walking over. They were dressed as if they were going to attend a wedding. When Cheng and I hold a banquet, it will be like this. Yan Zhika's bright eyes rolled up, her thoughts drifting. As her thoughts ran wild, she stepped forward and blurted out, "Dad, Mom?" Before she could finish speaking, she was already stunned. After 4 years of studying abroad, she was no longer the shy little girl she used to be. However, at this moment she still blushed. "Oh no, I've been led into a ditch by Cheng. How embarrassing. I don't want to stay here, I want to go back." Seeing Lu Jisheng, Qi Fang and the others' dumbfounded expressions, Yan Zhika hated that there was not a crack in the ground for her to hide in. She quickly recalled how she felt during the summit forum speech and forced herself to calm down. Visualizing the confrontation formula, she pretended as if nothing had happened and smiled, "Uncle, Auntie, the car is just outside. Let's go out." Lu Jisheng and Qi Fang looked at each other with kind smiles on their faces. They replied in unison, Okay. After getting in the car, Yan Zhika had the style of Wang Gu, talking to Qi Yunfei, Qin Xiaoxiao and Ma Shi endlessly. From time to time, she took advantage of their topics so that the Lu couple could interrupt and not feel neglected. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Jiuwen Stadium. The girl led them through the VIP passageway and into the private room. Looking at the familiar faces of the physical invulnerability mighty ones walking around, Qi Fang suddenly pulled Lu Jisheng. "Help me check if my collar is done. Are there any threads on the back? Seriously, why are you so nervous?" Granny Lu entered the Grandview Garden. Lu Jisheng laughed and pretended to size her up. "No problem." At this moment, he glanced outside and pointed at himself. "Should I keep it all buttoned up or unbuttoned?" "Aren't you not nervous?" Qi Fang scolded him jokingly. "This is being polite. Lu Jisheng answered with difficulty. Then he lowered his voice and said, "Zhika's parents will be coming later. We have to make Qing proud." "Only you can do it," Qi Fang said, but she was scrutinizing her husband again. She even pulled Qi Yunfei, Qin Xiaoxiao, and the rest over to provide objective opinions. Yan Zhika was already in the dance stage. She had sharp eyes and ears. How could she not hear her parents-in-law's whispers? She held back her laughter and deliberately went outside to welcome her relatives, leaving them some space in the private room. After a few minutes, she saw her father, Yan Kai, and Empress Dowager, Ji Mingyu, walking in hand. They were so affectionate as if they had just been married. "Where are Grandpa and Grandma?" Yan Zhika asked curiously. "They went to chat with their old friends," Ji Mingyu replied with a smile. They were worried that Lu's parents would be too nervous and stressed. "That's true." Yan Zhika heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed her brows. "You're siding with an outsider. First, you asked us to come back early from Kingstown, and then you secretly flew straight to Lu's place. You haven't been home for several days. You're not even married yet." Seeing her daughter's smile, Ji Mingyu's face changed. She scolded her daughter, and in return she acted like a spoiled child. In the private room next to them, Kai Zhongming smiled at his former roommates, Zhao Chong, Zhang Jingye, Qiu Zhigao, former teammates Li Mao, Sun Jian, He Zi, and the non-staff member Yan Xiaoling. This is not a competition at all. It's more like a gathering of old friends. It's like attending a feast. Just then a few more people came in through the door. The leader was a chubby man with an amiable appearance. The other was very tall and had a restrained aura. They were Jiang Fei and Qin Rui. The other two seemed to be their girlfriends. Looking at the room full of strangers, Jiang Fei suddenly felt a little uneasy, although he recognized Kai Zhongming and the other members of the martial arts club. The voices suddenly disappeared. The atmosphere became quiet and a little awkward. But some people were born to be in this kind of situation. Kai Zhongming approached and said with a bright smile, Jiang Fei? Qin Rui? I often hear Qing mention you guys. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Kai Zhongming. You can call me Talker. The estrangement was broken. With Lu Qing as the link and Little Ming as the lubricant in the middle, everyone was about the same age. Soon they had a good chat and the atmosphere became warm again. On the aisle outside the door, Lin Kei walked in with his hands in his pockets, wearing a white shirt and black pants. He glanced at the two boxes where his relatives were, and then at the place where the voices of Kai Zhongming and the others came from. Without hesitation, he pushed open the door behind him and sat quietly in the corner, as if he was still a member of the Songqing University Martial Arts Club. The sky was getting dark. The audience sped up to find their seats. Comrade Shi Jiangwo also came to the VIP private room where his old friends were. He paused, took out his phone and looked at the photos in the album. He nodded silently. Well, this is what Wukong looks like. I can't forget. After confirming, he smiled leisurely and pushed the door open. Dragon King. Lu Qing. As the audience grew, cheers started to warm up the atmosphere. The competition didn't feel like a final battle. Instead, it felt like a festive festival. Of course, the reporters didn't think so. They used all kinds of methods to exaggerate the tension and anticipation of the competition. Will it be the handover of Longhu's authority? How far is Lu Qing from Dragon King? According to research, less than 10% of people think Lu Qing can win. Lu Qing will be the warrior sage in the future, but he definitely won't be the winner today. Hope is zero. Kai Zhongming led the conversation while browsing the content and gathering information. Seeing that it was time, he smiled at Li Mao, Jiang Fei and the others. I'm going to start working. He took out his laptop from his backpack and set up various peripherals. After a while, he started the live broadcast. Everyone, it's time for you to experience the VIP private rooms of Jiuwen Stadium. In the exclusive resting room, Lu Qing opened his eyes, got up slowly and walked to the door. Clang. He pushed open the door, welcomed the flowing light and walked step by step to the grand stage. The moment he entered the venue, the cheers were even louder. Lu Qing waved his hand and turned to look at the few VIP private rooms that belonged to him. There is a little bit of light in his life there. He calmed himself down, retracted his gaze and turned to look at the center of the arena. Dragon King Qin Chitao was already standing there. He was wearing a navy blue suit and his back was straight. He looked majestic and tall, like a volcano that was about to erupt. Chapter 744. In the past 6 months, Lu Qing hadn't had a formal battle with Dragon King. However, they had never stopped sparring in private. In the past 2 months, he had only won once or twice out of 10 times, and those times were when both parties were equally restrained. This meant that things would get worse in a crucial battle. The saying that there was zero hope was too biased, but a 10% chance of winning was close to the truth. This was the consensus of the top experts, as well as Lu Qing's understanding. But as long as there was a glimmer of hope, he wouldn't be dejected or afraid. He would use all his passion and courage to chase, grasp, and hold on until the end. This was a trait he had developed throughout his journey, and also influenced by Battle King Dong Baxian. He could fail, but he couldn't admit defeat. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Lu Qing's emotions flowed like a calm tide. His will grew steadier and his aura was contained. When he reached his predetermined position, he finally raised his gaze and looked straight at his opponent as the challenger. It was a handsome, masculine face with chiseled features. It was a face that no expert in the world would dare to look at for 10 years. Dragon King Qin Chitao. Although the referee had retreated to the edge, he could sense the smell of gunpowder in the air. A battle was about to break out. Just like the ancient rules used to determine the winner, the Battle of Warrior Sage followed another tradition, and that was that there was no conversation time. Before Lu Qing could gather his 5 flames and prepare, the referee glanced at the hanging electronic clock, raised his right arm and swung it down heavily. Begin. The new Battle of Warrior Sage had begun. The loser would not be remembered, and the winner would be crowned the champion. Bam. Qin Chitao's accumulated aura exploded like a volcano erupting horizontally. Using his right fist, which was covered in a thick layer of faint purple, he forcefully dragged his body across the 30-meter distance towards Lu Qing's face. Fast and fierce. This wasn't much weaker than Dong Baxian's Xuanpa or Qian Dongluo's Thunderbolt. In terms of aura, it was even better. The air around them reddened rapidly as though reflecting the sea of flames. The clash seemed to have blended into one with the referee's voice, the change in environment and the passage of time. Lu Qing had the time and ability to dodge, but for some reason he was half a beat slower, as though it was destined to be so. But under Qin Chitao's guidance, his spirit trembled. His body, as though stimulated, surged with unprecedented strength. He broke through his condition and climbed to a new peak. Is this the sharpening and strengthening of a top-level battle? How amazing. In a fight between masters, every second counts. Lu Qing had lost the best chance to dodge because of his slow movement. He could only suppress his thoughts, lower his waist, and twist his muscles and fascia. He shook out his right arm and punched out like a cannonball. Attack against attack. Because he was inferior to the Dragon King in all aspects of the fire sect, he did not use his weakness to attack the Dragon King's strength. Instead, he catalyzed the Ice Soul technique to counter the Dragon King's strength. Then, he accumulated the Emperor Yen technique in each of his punches, accumulating his chi and unleashing his full power. In a split second, he had already decided on his follow-up strategy. Bam! Fists collided and sparks flew in all directions. However, most of the faint purple flames were sealed in ice. When they merged or tore apart everything, they exhausted themselves and dimmed and extinguished. There were even a few translucent purple snowflakes that fluttered in midair. Bam! Qin Chitao stretched his back and threw another punch in an extremely aggressive and domineering manner. It was like a prairie fire. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Lu Qing couldn't escape from the series of wild attacks. He could only defend passively. But he didn't panic. His ice heart froze and his spirit settled. He countered with punch after punch of ice spirit. Under the clash of cold and heat, thin mist filled the air. It was like a fairyland. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. As the flames around them grew brighter and brighter, Lu Qing suddenly opened his mouth and let out a roar. His left fist punched out with bulging muscles. His Emperor Yin force had been accumulated to the limit. A layer of light purple ignited and covered the area heavily. It seemed to be only a small amount, but it was actually formed by the compression of countless Emperor Yin. If it exploded directly, it could flatten an area of 10 square meters and dig a hole. Qin Chitao's expression didn't change. He tightened his half-hanging left arm and swung it back. The surrounding flames seemed to have been summoned. They gathered at one point and lit up brightly. This was the advanced application of 9 rotations of 5 flames. Boom. A sudden light flashed, leaving the broadcast screen white. Then, smoke and dust expanded along with the flames, turning into a mushroom-like cloud that soared into the sky. Only then did the deafening sound of the explosion reverberate, causing the minds of the audience who had long been prepared to buzz, causing the ordinary glass in the unimportant places to crack and shatter. Before the terrifying shock waves subsided, Qin Chitao broke through the layers of obstacles. Like a soldier walking in a rain of bullets, he closed in on Lu Qing again and launched another round of fire-like invasion. Just like that, he blocked Lu Qing's ultimate move. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Lu Qing tried a few moves but still couldn't shake him off. Whether it was the buildup of Emperor Yen and Ice Spirit, the ingenious short-range changes, or the initial condensation of 5 flames, they were all destroyed by Dragon King Qin Chitao's own fire sect ferocious attacks. He fully demonstrated what it meant to defeat 10 with 1 strength. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, Lu Qing suddenly felt weightless in a collision between an elbow and a fist. Like a kite with a broken string, he flew backwards. While he was still in the air, he had already unleashed 3 bursts of Emperor Yen force, helping him change direction 3 times in a row to escape. However, Dragon King Qin Chitao was also a fire sect physical invulnerability expert. His moves were purer than Lu Qing's. He pounced forward and changed direction, locking onto his opponent with ease. At this moment, ice crystals appeared on the surface of Lu Qing's body. He used this opportunity to squeeze out new flame force and unleashed another burst. Bam! There was a faint sound coming from his body. His body, which was already at the end of its flight, made a strange turn and bounced away. For changes of direction. This was the result of Lu Qing's combination of cosmic universe style and fire sect techniques. He had broken the ceiling of physical invulnerability experts who could only change direction 3 times. This was also one of his trump cards today. Seeing that Dragon King seemed to be powerless, Lu Qing's eyes suddenly froze. This was because the sparks of fire around Qin Chitao had gathered into a ball at some point. Bam! The explosion of the fireball gave the Dragon King a new impetus to change its direction, allowing it to charge over with a roar. He's really not far from the Forbidden Land. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to change direction 4 times. Lu Qing seemed to have understood. Because his mesmerizing snow steps footwork was interrupted, He had no choice but to fall into Dragon King's suppression again and face thousands of punches and kicks. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. He had used up all his trump cards but still couldn't turn the situation around. Gradually he could only hold on and wait. In the stands and in the box, Yanzhika, Qifeng, Ji Mingyu, Jiang Fei, and the rest subconsciously held their breaths. Their hands were either tightly clenched or clenched into fists. Rationally, they knew that Lu Cheng's chances of winning today were very low. They were mainly here to witness his first title match and enjoy the excitement. However, when the battle officially began, they couldn't help but feel a little hopeful, hoping for a miracle. However, Dragon King at 100% once again showed what the legendary twins were, and what the era of Dragon King and Warrior Sage was. It seemed that it wouldn't be long before Lu Cheng swallowed the bitter pill of defeat. And it was obvious that he had used up all his tricks. As if they were listening to a countdown, the cheers of the audience quieted down. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. With the burning pain in his mind and the erosion of the flames, Lu Cheng was triggered. His surroundings turned gloomy. A feeling of boundless coldness, silence, and loneliness materialized. In the depths of this gloomy darkness, emotions such as love, pity, protection, and obsession to live turned into stars, illuminating the cold, darkness, and loneliness around him. This was Lu Cheng's increasingly perfected state of mind to resist the spread of Dragon King's prairie fire. At his peak, Dragon King's punches and kicks carried some state of mind. Bam bam bam. Bam bam bam. Domineering, barbaric, scorching, and terrifying feelings burned fiercely. With Chen Qitao's aggressive punches and kicks, they slowly but surely devoured Lu Cheng's universe. The gloomy darkness began to roll back, and the radiance was pressed closer and closer. Lu Cheng's mental state slowly shrank to only half an inch away from his body. After another 2 or 3 hits, it would be beaten back to its original state. Bam! The volcano erupted and the flames surged with the fists. Lu Cheng's body swayed slightly as he barely blocked Dragon King's fists. However, his own state of mind was completely collapsing and shrinking inwards. The radiance merged into one and became more and more condensed. The darkness rolled back, wanting to devour and absorb them into nothingness. The end of the universe had come. In that split second, Lu Cheng seemed to be attracted by the picture. He suddenly thought of the small courtyard in the capital, the scroll hanging in Old May's room, the statue of the heavenly primogenitor, the restriction sect, the clear jade chapter, and the palm as white as jade pressing down on him. The starry sky and the universe became smaller and smaller, more and more solidified. The stars were destroyed one by one, and the darkness rapidly shrank until it converged into a single point. Then it spurted out and shattered into pieces. How similar it was to what was happening now. All of a sudden, Lu Cheng seemed to have understood something. He no longer cared about the darkness that had returned to its original form. His force, mind, and everything else suddenly shrank inward, adding in the little bits of condensed brilliance. He added in the feelings of love, joy, pity, protection, and willingness to give up his life for this. After an instant, the darkness engulfed the radiance and condensed it into a single point. However, that single point was bursting with a blinding brilliance. Bam! As the brilliance burst forth, Lu Cheng threw the most powerful punch of his life. This wasn't just a punch of destruction, it was also a punch of creation. The great vitality of destruction. This was the essence of the restriction sect, Clear Jade chapter. Everything was destroyed and something new was born. Dragon King Chen Qitao's eyes were completely occupied by the jade white fist. However, he wasn't surprised. Instead, he made use of this stimulation to ignite his own spirit. All of a sudden, he transformed from numerous volcanoes into a real sun. He was heavy, hot, and terrifying. Bam! The sun fell, punching the void. The two fists collided, and the world seemed to freeze for an instant. Rumble. The Jiuan Stadium seemed to have experienced an earthquake as it shook violently. This time there was no mushroom cloud, no wind, and no flames. However, both Lu Cheng and Dragon King were shorter by a meter. With the fists as the center, a 1-meter-deep crater with a diameter of about 20 meters appeared in the arena. Many of Lu Cheng's capillaries were broken, and his clothes were torn in many places. Not a single piece of skin was left unscathed. His body felt drained. He was happy that he could throw such an earth-shattering punch, but also depressed that his body had deteriorated greatly. If Dragon King were to attack again, he would probably only be able to block a few punches. At this moment he saw Chen Qitao standing there. His breathing was deep and his vitality was weak. In contrast, illusory flames surged around him. The scarlet red and faint purple flames were scorching. Chance. The thought flashed through Lu Cheng's mind. Without thinking, he retracted his qi and blood and formed the last Do formula. Then his Dan force gushed out and he took a step forward. He was in front of Qin Chitao, and he threw a punch at his opponent's head. Layers of invisible flames gathered spontaneously. The closer Lu Cheng's fist was to Dragon King, the stronger the resistance. However, compared to the Do formula, it was still weak and could only slow down the speed. A second later, Lu Cheng's fist landed beside Qin Chitao's head and stopped there. There was no more resistance. He raised his head in shock and looked over. He saw that Dragon King's pupils had disappeared, leaving only a sea of flames. A sea of flames that felt unusually real. The sea of flames was reflected on the outside. Faint purple, scarlet red, light blue and gold swirled in the air. In that instant, Lu Cheng inexplicably understood Dragon King's condition. Using the stimulation and catalysis of my punch, he burned himself and exceeded his limits. He finally broke through the gap between man and God and opened the door to the forbidden territory. Because the breakthrough was a process, not a node, he lost. At this moment, the fire cloud suddenly spread, turning the entire venue into a sea of flames. However, Lu Cheng didn't feel any heat or scorching heat. It was so real, yet so fake, just like Elder May's courtyard that was always like spring. Witnessing this scene, the warrior sage Qian Donglu, who was sitting in a private room, suddenly paled. It was as if a certain victory had been unexpectedly snatched away. Qin Chitao raised his head and looked over. His lips curled. He looked back at Lu Cheng and nodded lightly. Well done. This was the first time Lu Cheng saw such an obvious smile on his face. With that, Qin Chitao turned around, threw off his broken shoes, and walked barefooted out of Jiuan Stadium with his back straight. In the silence, the referee finally came back to his senses. He raised his right arm and announced loudly, Lu Cheng wins. The audience also came back to their senses and applauded, both for Dragon King and Lu Cheng. Moments later, the spotlight shone on Lu Cheng. The person in charge of the organizing committee shouted into the microphone, let's not talk about other things. Let's not worry about that for now. Let's welcome the new warrior sage. Warrior sage Lu Cheng. Warrior sage, the saint of martial arts. Chapter 745. In the freshly decorated live streaming room, Xu Rui, who was wearing an intellectual knee-length dress, looked at Lu Cheng and smiled. I've been waiting for this interview for so long. She wanted to say, you've been dragging it out for too long. However, when the words warrior sage entered her mind, she subconsciously changed to a more tactful way of saying it. Lu Cheng didn't sit like a bell like most martial artists. Instead, he leaned back comfortably and said, can't help it. I have to focus on preparing for the warrior sage battle. Alright, we're streaming online today. There's no delay or editing. If you say anything you shouldn't say, everyone will hear it immediately and won't be able to take it back. So think carefully, said Xu Rui half jokingly and half reminding. Lu Cheng nodded with a smile. Then I'll have to think twice before I act. Xu Rui held a stack of papers in her hand. It looked like the outline of the interview. However, she didn't even look at it, treating it as decoration. First of all, congratulations on becoming the warrior sage, said Xu Rui with a bright smile. After that battle, the evaluation of you online and offline has increased again. They're full of praises for you. Things like how there will be many superpowers in the future, how you've reached the level of Dragon King and Warrior Sage, how you're the king of the Age of Gods, and how you'll have the most titles in the future. What do you have to say about this? Lu Cheng thought for a few seconds before answering frankly, when I first saw it, I was quite proud. Seeing Xu Rui break into laughter, he shook his head and sighed. That's human nature. However, it does raise my status too much. I'll need at least a few more years to reach the level before Dragon King and Warrior Sage. Now, I'm in the same class as other superpowers. I'm not afraid of them and they won't be afraid of me. In a few more years, others might also reach the level before Dragon King and Warrior Sage. For example, Kirin and God-slaying Saber who aren't even 50 years old, Wisdom King who'll be around 30, or Peng Liyun and Ren Li who have their own path. Xu Rui's eyes turned. She wasn't stingy with her praise. But I believe you'll be the brightest and most dazzling one. Thank you. Lu Cheng could only reply. Xu Rui thought for a few seconds and continued to dig deeper into the topic. I'm not just saying empty words. The punch you used to defeat the Dragon King to help the Dragon King break through was truly earth-shattering, world-shocking, and unparalleled. I think that, Other than the warrior saint, none of the current superclass experts would be able to block that punch head-on. Lu Qing shook his head and laughed. First of all, no matter how strong the move is, it's useless if it can't hit the target. If it can't be blocked, it can be dodged. Secondly, I can't use this punch casually. I need to be at the right time, place, and people. He spoke vaguely and didn't talk about the factors involved. After all, he couldn't let others know too much about his trump card. The reason he was able to throw that punch was mostly due to the terrifying pressure of the Dragon King. From his mind to his punches and kicks, he had used external forces to help him complete the condensation and simulate the scene of him returning to a single point. Without this, it would have taken him 5 to 6 years to complete it on his own accord. Besides, the Dragon King was able to cooperate so well because he had a good understanding of his own cosmic universe style. Secondly, he had been studying the restriction sect Clear Jade chapter for a long time. If it had been the warrior saint, he would have had to go through more trouble to achieve it. He might not even have been able to do it. As for other superclass experts, they wouldn't go through so much trouble to seek failure. They would deliberately avoid such situations. Only a punch with the right time, place, and people could defeat such a Dragon King. Shu Rui agreed and didn't ask any more questions. Instead, she smiled and said, "After witnessing it for 2 years, everyone is very interested in your cosmic universe-style martial arts. They look forward to it very much. I heard that you also have thoughts of starting your own sect. Well, not the independent kind. On behalf of the audience, I'll use this line to express my feelings. So, where can I buy it?" Lu Qing pondered and said, "I'll give the foundation to the martial arts schools of the Ice God sect and the Longhu Club. When there are good seedlings, maybe I'll take them as my disciples." "Oh, I'm looking forward to it." Shu Rui sighed. "It's a pity that I'm old and can't practice martial arts anymore." "Not really," Lu Qing said politely. At the same time, he promoted his wife's plan. "And the cosmic universe style can be used to nourish one's body and beautify one's face." "Really?" Shu Rui blurted out. Lu Qing smiled and said, "Let's not look at the advertisement but the effect. When the time comes, something similar will come out. Well, it's mainly my wife who changed it." Shu Rui's eyes were about to turn red. She just wanted to ask when the results would come out. She teased him and said that the majority of her female compatriots were looking forward to it. Then she smiled and said, "Wife? You're calling her so intimately. You're not calling her your girlfriend but your wife? You're getting married soon?" "Yes, we've already gotten the marriage certificate. The only thing left is the wedding. It's in October." Lu Qing shared his joy. After the parents of both parties agreed on the wedding date, Lu Qing and Yin Zhika told them that they had already gotten the marriage certificate a few days later. Of course, they didn't say when they got it. Qi Fang and the others thought that it was done after the marriage was settled. "Congratulations, congratulations. You've got a major exam and a minor exam." Shu Rui put the paper on her lap and greeted them with the etiquette of a martial artist. Without waiting for Lu Qing to answer, she asked with great interest, "What kind of wedding do you want to have? More modern or more classical?" "More classical, but there's no such thing as a red veil," Lu Qing answered frankly. "I'm looking forward to that scene." Shu Rui clapped her hands and said. The chatty interview continued for a while. Shu Rui thought of something and said with a smile, "You've always said that the Dragon King is your idol. How does it feel to defeat your idol?" "It's very complicated. It's a little predestined. My master once said that the greatest respect for an idol is to challenge him and defeat him." Lu Qing answered with some consideration. "Then besides the Dragon King, who else is a martial artist that you used to admire?" Shu Rui asked curiously. Lu Qing didn't hide. "The late bloomer Liang Yifan. At that time I wanted to be a late bloomer like him." "It's a pity that you're a young hero," Shu Rui joked. She thought for a while and said, "Liang Yifan once said that it was a pity that he didn't see you when you just started practicing martial arts at Songqing University." Lu Qing chuckled and said, "Actually he saw me." "Huh? Really?" Shu Rui's eyes widened. Lu Qing smiled and said, "When he came to Songqing University, I was in charge of the security at the main entrance of the hotel." Actually, you can't call it security. Later, I even asked him for an autograph. But at that time, I was very inconspicuous. He probably doesn't remember." Liang Yifan, who was at home playing with his children and listening to the live broadcast, suddenly looked up in surprise. Shu Rui was even more excited. "It sounds like a legend. The little security guard at that time could only stay up all night to look up to the other security guard. In the end, he rose to the same level as the other security guard and even defeated him. The internet also started a heated discussion. Everyone was quite excited. Who hadn't fantasized about something similar? After talking about Liang Yifan, Xu Rui took a deep breath and tried to find another topic to calm down. Lu Qing, no, Your Excellency Warrior Sage, when I was doing the program, entering the physical invulnerability stage, I noticed that you are more interested in the internet. Do you visit your own fan forum? Yes, Lu Qing said concisely. Xu Rui smiled and asked again, as a member of Longhu Club, do former fans visit the fan forums of Longhu Club and Dragon King? Yes. Lu Qing didn't hide it. On the forum, Wonton Seller said, clenching fist high five expression. Like I said, they will come to watch often. Oh no. I once slandered him. Will I be punched to death? Someone said half-jokingly. I'm afraid I'll be cremated. While everyone was discussing, Xu Rui asked, then do you have an account? What's your nickname? Can you tell us? Lu Qing chuckled and replied, Schrodinger's tiger. What? In the forum, the girl Wonton Seller exclaimed in shock. Ha. What the hell? Words of shock and astonishment popped up one after another. After the interview, Lu Qing got into his SUV and returned to his villa by Xiaopei Lake. He scanned his fingerprint and opened the door. As soon as he stepped in, he heard Yanjika ask, Qing, what do you think of this outfit? I plan to wear it at the wedding. Lu Qing looked up and saw that his wife was wearing an elegant Han Dynasty costume with a black base and red edges. Under the bright light, she was so beautiful that she looked like someone who walked out of a painting. Suddenly, he felt like he was back in his first year of university, looking at his wife in a red and white Han Dynasty costume in the distance from the martial arts arena. The corners of Lu Qing's mouth curved upwards. Very. During the Lantern Festival last year, the lights in the flower market were bright as day. End of book. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.